close enough. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our April 15th, 2026 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. Paper copies of the agenda are available for those of you who are here with us in person on the table back by the door you came through. I do believe that Robin made coffee also in case anybody needs a caffeine boost this evening. And the full packet is available on our website with all included agenda items. Reviewing our full agenda, first we'll consider the consent agenda, after which we will have general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we apply certain rules regarding public comments. We will do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. Individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission, and we reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and residence for our meeting minutes if comfortable doing so, and please address your comments directly to the commission. We will hear from people in person first, then look to our Zoom meeting attendees. Please use the raise your hand function if you wish to provide your public comment virtually. Please also know that comments received by the commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you leave your contact information with county staff, we will try to get any specific questions answered. After general public comment concludes, we'll move on to our regular business agenda item, our agenda for tonight. There are 5 items on our regular agenda for this evening. And for each action item, we will hear from staff first or an applicant or community partners, followed by questions from the commission, and then we will open the floor for public comment that is specific and relevant to that item. Once public comment is concluded, we will bring the item back to the commission for further discussion and a vote on any action items. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. And with that, this evening, we actually have a couple of proclamations again to kick us off. And the first one is going to be read by Commissioner Kelly, so I'll turn it over to him.
I'm pleased to read a proclamation for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. As we celebrate 25 years of Sexual Assaultness Awareness Month, we recognize how far we've come and the work that is still ahead. Moving forward, we renew our focus on prevention, healing, and action. Whereas sexual violence is a serious and pervasive crime, and 43.6% of women, nearly 52.2 million, and nearly a quarter of men, 24%, or 27.6 million in the United States experience some form of contact sexual violence in their lifetime. And whereas most women and men across all sexual identities who experience contact sexual violence reported that the person who harmed them was someone they knew. And whereas 4 in 5 American Indian and Alaskan Native women, or 84.3%, have experienced violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 2 have experienced sexual violence. And whereas sexual assault and sexual violence remain a critical safety concern in Kansas, where 977 rapes were reported in 2024, 22% of which involved children ages 0 to 14, and where only 13.3% of reported rapes resulted in an arrest, leaving many survivors waiting for justice. And whereas more than 1 in 4 non-Hispanic Black women in the United States were raped in their lifetime, and whereas human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking, thrives on the exploitation of vulnerable populations, with 20% of trafficking victims being children and a 62% increase in trafficking responses reported since 2011. And whereas 32.9% of adults with intellectual disabilities have experienced sexual violence, and whereas large-scale world sporting events, including the FIFA World Cup, bring an influx of population, increased demand for hospitality, and strained local systems, creating conditions that traffickers exploit, often causing significant upticks in online sexual service advertisements. And whereas 47% of all transgender people have been sexually assaulted at some point in their lives, And whereas the Kansas City metro region prepares to host the 2026 World Cup, local organizations, law enforcement, and advocacy groups are mobilizing to prevent a projected increase in trafficking and to train the community to recognize warning signs. And whereas we recognize that sexual violence is preventable through education, proactive awareness, and holding perpetrators accountable, and that by taking action to prevent sex trafficking around major events, we also protect our community year-round. And whereas we stand with survivors of sexual assault and trafficking, and we believe that everyone has a role to play in fostering a culture of safety, consent, and vigilance. Now, therefore, the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center in Douglas County and the Douglas County Commission in Kansas do hereby proclaim April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We call on Douglas County community members, community leaders, and sports fans to learn the signs of trafficking, report suspicious activity, and support survivors, ensuring that the excitement of upcoming sporting events is not overshadowed by exploitation. Adopted this 15th day of April, 2026.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I believe we've got some community partners, guests from the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center. Please come forward and share any further information you'd like to with the commission and with the community.
Hi, Commission. Thank you all for proclaiming this month the 25th anniversary of Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I just want to make sure that you all know and the county knows about our services and a little bit of what we're doing this month. We have a 24-hour, 24/7 hotline, 365 days a year that we have trained advocates that can chat with folks about any questions relating to sexual violence, sexual assault, rape, harassment. Those advocates are also trained to accompany people to the hospital, to where they need help, rather be in police interview rooms, wherever it may be. We have full-time therapists on staff, so folks that are survivors and folks that have experienced sexual trauma, sexual violence can have free therapeutic services for any age and throughout their lifetime. We also have prevention education efforts where the last month, we've done over 30 sessions in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools talking about consent, talking about touching, talking about sexual violence. And you'll see us in support groups in the jails and all over the county. This month specifically, we have a lot going on top of that. You might have seen our ribbons that have been up on Mass Street in South Park, where there's a QR code that tells you more about Sexual Assault Awareness Month. You might have seen our stones around where folks can find a little teal stone and give some hopeful messages. On top of that, we've already had 2 or 3 fundraisers, trivia nights, pool tournaments. We have, starting tomorrow, you'll see over 10 restaurants in town have a drink on their menu where they're donating profits to Sexual Assault Awareness Month into our center. We're celebrating Safe Bar, 15 years of Safe Bar. We invite everyone to come out to Harbor Lights and learn more about the Safe Bar initiative. And then we are ending on a high note on Take Back the Night.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, commissioners. I want to appreciate Douglas County and the community at large for supporting the work that we do at the care center. Without your support, there's no way we'll do this work. Thank you for the awareness and for proclaiming April to be Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Thank you. Come join us on Denim Day on Saturday, the 29th. We'll be working with KU and Miss Teen Kansas to bring awareness to this on Denim Day. So come loud. Come in your best denim look, you may win a prize. Thank you.
Thank you both. We appreciate the work you do. And as a survivor and as a former volunteer for your organization, it's a very important topic for us to not lose sight of and to keep talking about because it touches more people than we know. On a practical note, we are, you may have noticed we're missing one commissioner tonight, so we don't have all commissioner signatures. Would you like it this evening or would you like us to get it to you later with all 5 signatures?
We are okay with whatever works for you. We could take it tonight. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have Commissioner Dorsey sign it and you can take it with you. And we can certainly get Commissioner Anderson's signature in the future if you would like it. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Do you want to give one quick shout out of your website where all of your event information is since you highlighted a couple of them.
Yes. Our SAM calendar is on our website at the State Care Center social media handle. So please take a look, support us in any way that you can. Thank you,
Thank you both.
Shannon.
Have a good
Appreciate it.
evening. And with that, we'll have Commissioner Willie read our next proclamation and have some guests come up and talk to us after that as well.
All right, I have the proclamation for National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, April 12th through the 18th of 2026. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require sheriff, police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of law enforcement, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life, preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our deputies, police officers, and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center. And whereas safety dispatchers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, and whereas public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information and ensuring their safety, and whereas the public safety dispatchers of the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in the past year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas, hereby proclaim the week of April 12 through 18, 2026 as National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, and joins in honoring the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keeps our county and our citizens safe. Adopted this 15th day of April, 2026.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. We got Tony Foster, and it looks like some of our telecommunicators to come up and share more information with us.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tony Foster, Director of the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center. It's my distinct honor to lead and represent the 35 telecommunicators that serve Douglas County on a daily basis, tirelessly and relentlessly. On their behalf, I'd like to thank the Commission for proclaiming this week National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. It's my pleasure to introduce you to two of our communicators. Our communicators a lot of times sit in the dark and not a lot of people get to see them. So we love to take this week to be able to highlight a couple of them, to be able to bring them in front of the public and recognize their hard work. So I would like to introduce you to Jesse Lindberg and Evie Vess.
Good evening. My name is Jesse Lindberg. I am emergency communicator and public education specialist with Douglas County Emergency Communications. I would just like to say greatly, thank you so much for this proclamation. To some, it might not mean a lot, but to us, it means everything. So thank you, commissioners, for it. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners, officials, and citizens of Douglas County. My name is Evie Vess, and I serve as an emergency communicator with Douglas County Emergency Communications Center. I'm here tonight to recognize a group of professionals whose voices are often heard long before help arrives, our public safety telecommunicators, the men and women who answer 911. During National Telecommunicators Week, we pause to honor their skill, their courage, and the quiet strength they bring to every shift. National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week is observed each year during the second week of April to highlight the commitment, service, and sacrifice of telecommunicators who serve 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. This week exists to help the public understand what we do and why this work matters to every one of us. We are the first voice a frightened, injured, or confused person hears when they call for help. In those moments, we must gather critical information quickly while keeping the caller calm and focused. Every call is triaged. We determine the nature of the emergency, the level of threat, and the resources required. We dispatch units, track locations, and maintain continuous contact with responders in the field, relaying updates, monitoring safety, and adjusting resources as situations evolve. Our decisions shape how police, fire, and medics respond to the scene. When the seconds count, we provide step-by-step guidance such as CPR instructions or bleeding control until responders arrive. During those high-stress situations, callers are often overwhelmed or terrified. It takes a unique skill set to offer calm reassurance while giving life-saving instructions. All the while, we're counting down the seconds until responders reach the scene. We manage these traumatic incidents back to back, often without any closure, while maintaining our professional composure for the next call. As of last year, our agency handled approximately 49,000 emergency 911 calls and approximately 89,000 non-emergency calls. With every call, we strive to make a difference and a real impact on the lives of our neighbors, families, first responders, and the community. I'm proud to work alongside such dedicated people who share a passion for helping those in need. Thank you for your time and support.
Thank you all. We appreciate you so much. And yeah, it's incredibly important work. And I can, as a commissioner, I brag on emergency communications in our dispatch center all the time. It's a core critical county service. And as a provider in the community, I know that the way that Douglas County dispatchers answer emergency calls for our residents and how they support first responders is well regarded and very much appreciated. So thank you all for your work. Commissioner Dorsey's got a proclamation signed for you. And if you'd like Commissioner Anderson's signature later, we can get that for you too. Thank you again for your work and for being here. All right, commissioners, that moves us on to our consent agenda. Does any commissioner wish to remove anything for questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Does anybody in the public wish to remove anything from the consent agenda for further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll pull that back. I'll double check with Sarah. No virtual folks, right? All right, commissioners, I'm ready for a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, passes unanimously. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to general public comment. Is there anybody here who wishes to provide general public comment about items not on today's agenda? Come on up, John. A reminder for anybody who might be listening online, please use the raise your hand function if you'd like to provide general public comment.
John M. 66029. I don't know if, just a point of information here for you all. I don't know if anybody was involved or paid attention to the city meeting last night. There was a motion, a discussion of pulling money back, clawing back money from Bert Nash associated with the Rockledge project that did not go through. The amount is somewhat substantial, $558,000. There was a discussion of when to do it and whether they were going to give extra time to Bert Nash. It struck me, though, that it's somewhat strange that this commission is very close to making a decision about the $1.6 million that Bert Nash asked for this year. And I understand there's a process going on about whether to make that decision or not. But it struck me as odd that with one hand, the county commission is going to hand Bert Nash a fairly substantial sum. And then on the other hand, the city is going to take a substantial sum back from Bert Nash. It makes it odd because this is all taxpayer money being passed through Bert Nash. Should it occur in that sequence? It was asked if the two bodies had talked to each other, and apparently they haven't. So I'm here today I suggested to the commission last night that that should occur, and I'm here to suggest that that should occur here as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, John. Anybody else here who would like to provide general public comment? Okay, seeing no takers. Any virtual hands, Sarah? All right, we'll close general public comment and move on to our regular agenda. Our first item is from Public Works, and I will turn it over to Chad.
Thank you, commissioners. With this item tonight, we are asking for approval of our vegetation management plan. This is a plan that guides the work of the Public Works Department in our roadside mowing, in our noxious weed control, our herbicide applications, sale of chemicals to residents, the things we do when we revegetate projects. It guides a lot of our operations around vegetation, and it's been very helpful for us. This plan's been in place now for 4 years, and it's helpful to have in writing for our staff what the expectations are, and also for the public to be able to read what we do and We do often get questions about these things, and it's great to be able to say, here's the document and let us know what you think. This plan does have a 2-year review cycle for sort of reapproval by the Board of County Commissioners, and that's what we're here tonight to look for. The 2026 plan's been updated with some factual information around budget and our staff and equipment. Once again, we've updated our prior year herbicide report of use, and all of the other information is pretty much the way we wrote it 4 years ago. It's working pretty well from our standpoint. So a week ago, we notified some folks that were involved in the original development of this and let them know that this is our opportunity for public comment. Traded a few emails this week, and I think some of those are here tonight, some of those folks. So looking for public comment and approval if appropriate, and questions you might have. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chad. Commissioners, we discussed this last week initially and had some questions for Chad at this time. Do commissioners have any other questions for right now before we open this up for public comment? Okay, then we'll just move right into public comment and invite anybody who wants to start us off to come on up. And make sure when you get up there to push the button on the microphone so you see the green light, and that'll push the button on the microphone when you get up there. You'll see a green light and it'll stay on for you. Nope, I'm not seeing the light change.
Now,
Oh,
there
you
we go. Well, I'm sorry, my hearing aids I'm at the age I'm needing all these spare parts, and that's one of them. So here I am. I don't want to take too long but what I want to do is to thank that guy over there sitting at the table. In 2022, various organizations, the Lettuce, in which I'm moderator for Lawrence Ecology Teams, United Sustainability Advisory Board, Sierra, Sustainability Action Network, and others were concerned about the use, particularly of herbicides, extensively in Douglas County. And we had these wonderful conversations with Chad. He got some hard balls thrown at him. He never got defensive. He explained, we learned, he learned. And I think it's showing, Chad, in what you've come up with this year in terms of decreasing the amount of pesticides used, and the kinds that are used are not as toxic as those that were before. And we also had some people that, of course, communicated to you, and I wanted to know that you probably read all that, but you get so much that Ken Lastman certainly is one of those people, along with, I have others, Sarah Talafario, Don Hawkins, Michael Allman, Nancy Muma, Penny Von Aken, and Ted and Margaret Kramar, Hank Garisco, and Karen Pagel Miners, and I'm sure I'm missing some. But I know that Ken was particularly appreciative because his family donated the park that's out at Wells Overlook, and for the time and effort you've taken with that. And then we have the renewed thing of Katie, Mr. Katie. He writes for a fish journal, and he's basically a professional fisherman. He goes out every day. And so he gave that feedback about what's happening in terms of the county lake. And that, again, was a major thing that happened in terms of declining to use pesticides there, but his concern is continue to watch out for runoff. And I think that's all what we're doing here. And so I just want to applaud the county commission. We're fortunate to have such a person on the staff representing us and informed and keeping us on the right thing. So thank you much.
Thank you, Thad. Anybody else who'd like to make public comment on this item? Come on up.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Landon. I live in rural Douglas County over in Wakarusa Valley. So I'm here to talk about the vegetation plan as well. And I understand this is a hot topic, and I understand that trying to reduce the amount of herbicides that you put into the environment is a great thing. I do this for a living myself and have done it for over 25 years. And so I know you're trying to balance something that's tough. But what you've done is not you've reduced them, you've eliminated them completely. all but 15 gallons a year that the county applies. 30 overall. You're accepting contracts to do noxious weed control on KDOT right away, township right away, and on KDOT in 2025, you didn't dispense 1 ounce of chemical, not one. And in the townships, out of all the townships, you did about 14 gallons worth. So how that equates to you, commissioners, who, when you look at the report, no one's going to expect you to understand it. But when I look at this report, that's 45 acres. That's your 3 trucks with 1 tank, 900 gallons. So I'm trying to figure out, what does that staff do the rest of the time? Do I care whether you apply herbicides in Douglas County? I do not. It doesn't bother me. I get it. What I care about is you have a staff, a full-time staff, and about $400,000 worth of specialized equipment to apply that chemical, and you apply 45 acres. Your annual report that you filed with the state of Kansas says you have 10,000 acres in Douglas County. Probably a very low number. In my guess, it's very low. But that is based off of your chemical sales, how much you apply. It's based on a variety of different things. The thing that I did find interesting in this report is how you say you don't like chemicals, and glyphosate is apparently one of those that you just hate. But you talk about how you use growth retardants, and they don't disturb and they don't kill. You use them around signposts. Commissioners, the Landmaster BWUs is a glyphosate. It's a 20% glyphosate mix. The label, and I can give you the label, it says right on it, bold and clear, non-selective herbicide. Keep away from vegetation you don't want to die. So you're using exactly the same thing you're saying you're not using to kill the stuff. You're just using it at a reduced rate. The report makes no sense to me. And I watched the budget hearings last year, and you're talking about adding another person to that staff to help mow. Well, I think you got 3 applicators that can mow. And in 45 acres, you can do that with a pump up sprayer and save about $400,000 worth of specialized equipment.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment about this agenda item? Okay, seeing no takers in person, any virtual hands, Sarah? All right, go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the commission for any questions, comments, discussion. Motion.
So I know last year we didn't generate a lot of public comment on it like they had, or 2 years ago it would have been like it had happened in 22, and I wasn't part of that process then from the inside anyway. But I did, because we had the extra week, which I really liked, being able to kind of push that out in the community and give folks the opportunity to give feedback and weigh in, and had, you know, similar comments to what we heard from Thad this evening about that the process had been responsive when this plan was created and that it continues to get better. I am very nerdy about this stuff and enjoyed all of the detail with it, but especially those last 3 or 4 pages where it's, you know, each chemical, how much amount, where it was used, and for what purpose. And I thought that was a lot of transparency. I appreciated it. I just think we've done a good job here. I guess my question would be, as we've kind of adopted the open space plan and kind of looked at like how do we continue to honor the lands that Douglas County manages, when will we talk about kind of next steps for like revegetating with natives and that sort of thing? It doesn't have to be within this plan here. I'm just curious, like, how does that conversation continue?
There is a space within this plan that talks about our county-owned properties that Public Works manages. So if the open spaces were to be managed by Public Works, we could fold those into this. There's probably a larger conversation about who manages those, what the purposes are, what the site planning is. So, you know, that's a down the road conversation. We do talk in here about using native grasses on our properties. We've got them on some remnant right-of-way areas that are wide enough to justify that work. We used, obviously, at Public Works facility, we've got native grasses. So those are easy to manage, and we like those. So I would assume that we would continue doing that if we had other areas to manage.
I guess I'm thinking about the mowed areas at Lone Star Lake, which I know that's not necessarily an easy place to revegetate because of the use that it gets, but just kind of thinking about what are other possibilities for that land.
Right. And Lone Star, would benefit from a park-wide site plan or use plan. That's a big task that honestly would overload us at the moment, but it would be something that could help with that. The thing that we run into there is the use is intense, the traffic is intense. Obviously, 4th of July weekend is a great example of that. Those lawn areas provide the space for those people, and they're fairly durable. And vehicles are sometimes in those areas. It's a park that takes a lot of focused management, and to say that we're going to do some things differently is going to have to be a pretty well thought out conversation.
I would say that we talked about that when we got the additional land around the spillway, that kind of once we get through some things with Blackjack, we've got some conversations there about native lands, and Caitlin's been a part of those efforts. My hope is that once we get through a few of these things, we might bring back a larger conversation about master planning around use of parks, and I think some of the vegetation could be wrapped into that.
And I appreciate the comment about 4th of July at Lone Star. So, fire suppression with mowed grass, a little bit easier there too. So I'm not expecting to roll that into this conversation, but I would be curious to see if there are opportunities to have those conversations in the future.
Other questions, commissioners? Okay. With that, I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the Public Works Department 2026 Vegetation Management Plan.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you, Chad. Moving on to item 4.2 from our planning department. We have a presentation. Come on up.
Good evening, Commissioners. Amy Miller, Assistant Planning and Development Services Director. We do have a presentation. Give me just a minute and I'll get it pulled up.
Amy, I'm going to need you to talk right into that microphone. You don't have to eat it, but you have to be right in front of it.
Will do. This item is the 2025 Annual Comprehensive Plan Review. Before we dive in, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Kristen Birmingham, who's a planner one in our office. She started in January and she did the heavy lift on this item. I'm sure you'll be seeing from her in the future. The annual review is a requirement of the Kansas state statutes. It's to predominantly determine if any part of the plan is obsolete, but it will also provide an overview of comprehensive plan and the amendments that have been processed during the year 2025. Plan 2040, our comprehensive plan, serves as a long-range policy guide that guides growth and development in the unincorporated areas of Douglas County and the city of Lawrence. It establishes community goals, policies, and strategies to guide decisions regarding land use. The plan underwent a complete rewrite and with extensive community engagement and was adopted in 2019. There are two main Kansas state statutes, both outlined in the staff report, that oversee the procedures for this annual review. Those statutes combined require that the Planning Commission annually review the plan to determine if the plan has become obsolete and forward their findings to the governing bodies. During 2025, there were 3 comprehensive plan amendments that were considered. 2, both changes to Chapter 8B land use plans for specific projects were adopted. 1, also a change to that same section, is in progress. It was approved by the Planning Commission, but has not been considered by the governing bodies. Staff has reviewed Plan 2040 and determined that it continues to function as designed and is effective and relevant with guiding development decisions. In addition, amendments were limited and very project-specific. As such, staff did not identify any portion of the plan that was obsolete. The Planning Commission received this item at their March 25th meeting and recommended to forward their findings to the governing bodies on a vote of 9-0 that the plan was not obsolete. And this action is actually from the Planning Commission. But your action this evening is to receive the annual comprehensive plan review findings from the Planning Commission in satisfaction with the annual reporting requirements. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, I had a question about item 3, still under review or development regarding the new Boston crossing. What kind of a time frame does that have for completion?
Currently does not have a time frame. It is in conjunction with other applications that have been submitted for that project that have not been considered by the Planning Commission yet. And so at this point, we are holding that comprehensive plan amendment from consideration from the governing bodies until those other applications catch up. And at this point, we do not have it scheduled for a Planning Commission meeting.
Shouldn't the applications come in accordance with the 2040 plan and not the other way around?
So the comprehensive plan amendment can be considered first on an agenda by the governing bodies. The Planning Commission has already considered it. And then if the other applications move forward, the applicant and the City Commission have requested that they come concurrently at the same meeting.
And that project's in the city limits, right?
That is correct.
Thanks.
Other questions, commissioners? Okay. With no other questions, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to provide public comment on this agenda item? Please come forward. Nope, go ahead and press the button.
Green light is on. Okay, thank you. I'm Michael Allman, 66044. If I understand what Ms. Miller said, and I think my interpretation of what I'm reading in tonight's agenda, it's talking, the action or whatever is that the commission receive the report about the comprehensive plan update. And for item AMDT, the amendment 250006, 1059, our old new Boston Crossing, is pending or in process, as Ms. Miller said. By accepting this report, I'm pretty sure that what it means is that the commission is not approving that amendment. Am I correct on that? You're nodding your heads, okay. Just wanted to make sure, because I'm opposed to that amendment, first of all. You probably are well aware of that. There's any number of reasons why the project is ill-advised, but as far as the comprehensive plan goes, right now the developer could, according to the revised Southern Development Plan, develop, I believe it's 35 acres, the area on the map that they're requesting be changed to 177 or so acres. Um, I don't find it very, I don't find the arguments very strong to change that and expand that acreage. Don't need to go into that tonight, but I just wanted you to be aware of that choice. That is essentially the choice, as I understand, in what the amendment that, thank you, that will come before you at some point. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment about this item? Anybody raise their hands online, Sarah? Okay, close public comment and bring this back for further discussion, comments.
Amy, can you confirm that our receiving of this report does not hold us to any future votes when it comes to anything in process or even out of process?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners, or motion? Great.
I move to receive the annual comprehensive plan review findings from the Planning Commission in satisfaction with annual reporting requirements.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Amy. All right. Clicking right along to item 4.3. We've got Caitlin here to talk to us about our Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Awards.
Alrighty. Good evening, commissioners. Yes, I'm Caitlin Amerlin, Heritage Conservation Coordinator for Douglas County, and I'm so excited to be presenting to you all the 2026 Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program Award recommendations on behalf of the Heritage Conservation Council. This is the grant program's 15th year and continues to be a really impactful way for Douglas County to support heritage conservation efforts throughout the county. The magnitude and impact of this program can be felt through so many events, so many different corners of the county, and really fills a much needed need for funding for natural and cultural heritage projects. It's a very unique program in the region, and I'm proud to steward it. That said, so this year we had another very busy, very competitive year for the program. We received 42 applications or requests for funding. That is by far the highest single number of applications that we've received. And the total number of requests is just over $1 million, kind of very similar to last year in terms of competitiveness. With all that demand and all that need, the Heritage Conservation Council reviewed each of the applications individually, scored them based on the review criteria outlined in the program guidelines. They sent their scores to me. We anonymized them and then used them as a tool in the discussion. Those discussions, they hold 2 review meetings. All of those are open to the public to attend, but all the application materials stand on their own, so there's no dialogue between applicants and the reviewers. So they make those decisions based on consensus. So those discussions look different each year, but ultimately they do a lot of hard work and kind of parsing out what the priorities can and should be. It's really not easy work. I'd say the vast majority of the applications that we receive are good to very good to excellent in quality and all merit some sort of funding consideration. And so I guess I just want to do a little shout out to the Heritage Conservation Council members for all of their hard work and really sorting through some really wonderful proposals for funding this year. That said, all of their recommendations are included in the agenda report. I did want to highlight this year we had an additional $40,000 for seed grants. This is that additional funding that made use of the HCC reserve funding. And I think it was very successful. We still have a bit of work to kind of recap on the year and how everything turns out. But we received 17 applications for seed grant funding in contrast to just 1 last year. And 11 of those 17 were new applicants to the program, which I personally am always very excited to see. I find it really striking that even though the program has existed for 15 years, we're still finding new organizations, new ways to support heritage in the county. And so that's about all I have for this year. I'd be happy to stand for any questions and consider hear from how you'd like to proceed.
Caitlin. I'll take the liberty of asking the first question. I was curious if you could elaborate a little bit on, in the staff report, you made mention of the awards that the HCC came to agree upon, leveraged over 1.7 million in matching funds or in-kind support. And I mean, because we're getting brief summaries and not the full application packet, right? We don't have that sort of visibility. So I just wanted to invite you to maybe offer some, any concrete examples that you could offer us about some of those funding things, streams that these dollars help leverage, if you can think of any off the top of your head. And then more generally, just, I'm just kind of curious to, I guess, peek behind the curtains about how the HCC as a group was able to suss that out and assess that and weight it in their process of determination.
Yeah, so in terms of the matching funds and resources, off the top of my head, I don't know of any concrete examples. A lot of it, and I think this is, how we set up this program is we don't distinguish between cash match and in-kind support. So I think a lot of the grant recipients, in my experience, do leverage a lot of volunteer time and hours and donated resources. I think that kind of speaks to the community-based nature of the program and that sort of smaller scale type of projects that this program is able to support. You know, community groups, I think of cemetery associations in particular. You know, there really isn't any other source of funding for that. And a lot of their match is typically in that volunteer time. And that's what comes to mind. I'm trying to think this year if there's any larger projects that are reaching bigger dollars. I know last year we contributed to a couple of those bigger grant projects where the county funding was one piece of the bigger puzzle, but I'd be happy to provide more detailed things on that for the awarded projects this year.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to try our best to clock for in the future, if other commissioners might agree with me on that sentiment. The idea that, and I kind of thought that knowing some of these organizations, that the sort of a dollar value to the volunteer labor and support is piece of that. So I appreciate you clarifying that you're not necessarily distinguishing between that. It's sort of all a catch-all of consideration, but I did find myself curious about some of these, especially some of the larger requests and, requests from institutions in particular, to have a little bit of a clearer picture about, are these dollars helping bring dollars to the community that might be difficult otherwise, whether that's from a state grant, a federal grant, foundation, et cetera, right? And so if there are concrete examples that are possible to clock for in the future, I think that would be interesting to know. And also in terms of the decision-making process, highlighting again the fact that this is the most amount of applications received so far, that it's significantly more, 4 times as much dollars asked for as is what is available, which makes it a tall task. And so I think assessing ways in which to further filter and evaluate that is a healthy practice. And I know that the HCC has been going through lots of iterations of that in recent years. But I found myself with a few of these wondering, for example, if the request was for 60,000 and 30,000 was awarded of that, was there any conversation about that particular application that illuminated the fact that there was sort of a minimum amount that could be a threshold amount that could be provided that would help trigger those dollars from elsewhere while still reserving funds for other projects? That's me nerding out a little bit about the process of it, but given the fact that there is such increasing interest, all of these new applicants and potential, partners in this space, I think it would be helpful to know that and understand it a little bit better, and maybe to consider differentiating, the categories of sort of volunteer contributed labor and in-kind material support versus how are we leveraging basically local match dollars, even if it's in kind of a roundabout way.
Yeah, and to clarify too, in the budget matrix, a portion of the application, we do have 3 separate grant requests, cash match, and in-kind. But in terms of what the council considers as far as the review criteria, it's matching resources. So I could pull that up. One thing I'd love to, and this is kind of sparking, is just generally report better on the outcomes of the grant program and how the applications match the actuals. And that's a really great point of also tracking how the anticipated match reflects the actual match of the project. So it's in here.
Similarly, I had some process questions, and it's hard because I care about all these projects and I really want to know all the nitty-gritty detail, but I recognize that that's not my role here necessarily. That's the council's role. There were a lot of partial fundings that were given, and I know that's a decision of the council. How do you have that communication, or maybe there isn't a communication really back with applicants about is this amount helpful, or does this amount really not allow the project to go forward at all? Because partial funding can sometimes be, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yes, I completely agree. So one thing we did add to the application this year is we added a checkbox that says, would you be interested in considering partial funding? And especially with the experience last year, I feel like I was better prepared. One of the parts of the process is all applicants have a pre-application meeting with me. And that was something I made sure to highlight to all applicants this year, and kind of highlighted that point of, be honest in checking this box and understanding the competitiveness of this program. And when you write up your budget narrative, keep that in mind. So that's, continuing to build on that. And so in terms of process for the partial funding awards, so once the awards are approved by you all, then it's my job to work with partners on those project agreements. And so in particular for the folks with partial awards, I reach out and we work together on how to refine the project scope and or budget to meet the partial funding needs. So often that looks like, if someone proposed to do 5 of something, they'll just do 2 instead. Or for other projects, they might be able to fundraise or find other financial resources to make up the difference to do the full scope. And so that's part of my job. And I also make it clear, something I find important is just that, if it is too low of a funding award, they're always welcome to decline without penalty. So they're not locked into doing this giant project with not enough funding. So that's also, I share that concern with the partial awards. And so I think we can continue to see how we can make that a little bit better each year.
And I'm not sure if all applicants, can envision that when we say checking the box to say I could accept partial funding, they might be thinking 90%. Some of these are 50%. Some of these are 30%. That's really significant. So, and I guess maybe the answer is just having that level of conversation in the pre-meetings, because some of those I could see that being a hardship, especially for a small organization, for a project that, it's hard to raise the rest of that to make it happen. And another question is, we always wanted this to be broad so that organizations that maybe don't have a strong footing yet in the community could come and do a project. And I think like of our, cemetery districts and things like that, where this was kind of their first foray into a grant world. But we don't just limit it to public entities and nonprofits. There's other entities that are applying also. Is that a conversation with the Heritage Council? Is that something that you want direction from us here, or do you have some advice?
Yeah, so in terms of types of organizations that apply or are eligible to apply, so currently it's open to just about anyone except for individuals. So businesses, for-profit businesses, nonprofits, local government entities, agencies, anyone can apply basically. So it's very wide open. I think one thing that came up this year that I noticed was just the council's reaction to the for-profit businesses that applied. And so I think perhaps any direction there, or I think we might take a look at revising that. I know it's open intentionally to capture a wide variety of different organizations that might be interested in this funding, but I think there might be some consideration so I can provide better feedback to applicants in the future, especially for those for-profit entities. I know the council this year had some those projects might not have risen to the top for the simple fact that they weren't, a community organization. And so I'd like to make that clear moving into future years.
And if you need guidance or input from us, that we can talk about that outside of the cycle. We usually do kind of get a chance to look over the criteria. Also, I heard Commissioner Reed say this, but heard in the community also about just questions about some of the big entities that applied. So KU being one of those, and institutions of that kind of size and magnitude for what is one of the only sources for some of these smaller organizations to be competitive for a grant. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that, in my experience with the program, has come up every year, especially during the deliberations and that sort of prioritization. I feel like that always does come up. We have nothing really set in the guidelines currently to distinguish between that sort of organization. One of my observations is often those larger organizations do have the administrative capacity to manage grants in a way that maybe other smaller groups don't. So sometimes if you have a group of community partners coming together to do this collaborative project, they might just default to the folks with the most administrative capacity to manage the grant on the group's behalf. So that would be just a consideration if we did want to take that into consideration moving forward, is just that element to it too. But yes, that is often a comment of the council in their discussions of, well, doesn't KU have a lot of money? And so, but ultimately, when you think about the projects that we're funding, those divisions don't have the funding to do that work. So it's complicated, but if there is a strong feeling or direction on this, happy to continue to revise project guidelines so we can capture that and so I can provide the best feedback to applicants.
And I think one of the reasons that the KU kind of question comes up is KU is required to put overhead into any grant they write. Is that correct? So including these would have an overhead written in. Do our other organizations do that, or are they allowed to do that?
Yeah, so we allow any applicant, any organization to build in up to 10% of indirect costs into the award. And I happen to know, and working with this, that often the KU applicants have to request a waiver from the powers that be to meet our lower match requirements, and often that's granted because the scale of our grants is much different. But that's something I encourage all applicants to do, and I would love to see more folks build that indirect cost into the grant awards. And having worked in the nonprofit space, knowing how challenging these grant awards can be for an organization of, yes, here's this wonderful funding for a project, but how do you also, pay your insurance? So that's something I think we can continue to encourage applicants to do, or maybe uplift it a little bit so folks know that that's an option available to them and is fundable through the grant program.
And I imagine if organizations applying are concerned that will kind of look negatively on their application, if they say, no, we're willing to do all of that part for free, but there isn't a small organization out there that couldn't use 10% to manage grant funds and manage overhead. I almost wonder if, when the commission gets a chance to talk about this for the next year, if we should give a more specific direction about, either no one can or everyone should, somewhere in that range, so that folks aren't falling into that boat of like, well, the more I operate my organization with a poverty mindset, the more likely I am to get funded for a project and burn people out. So there's a lot of fantastic organizations on here that I know could use that too. And the other question that I ask every year, I may have more later, but is about the geography of awards. And that's just something that as a county commission, you need to be cognizant of. All of the folks who live within Douglas County, including all of our cities, are citizens of Douglas County, and they all matter to us. And those cultural stories can cross, and biological stories can cross lines there too. But I'm always just want to be aware of how county dollars are helping to fund our smaller communities also. So I was glad to see that the charts you had in here that talked about some of that, but seems like some years we really have a broad spread and other years we don't have quite as much. And I don't know that we've given any specific direction about that, but can you talk to how the council processes the geography of those requests?
Yeah, so that's one of so in addition to our review criteria, we have these additional priorities that kind of factor into the full slate of awards. And so one of those is geographic diversity of the awards, but that is one of several prioritization factors. So that is something that often comes up in the discussion. But depending on the awards presented for the year, it just always shakes out just a little bit different. So yes, I guess the simplest way to respond is that's one of several ways in which they prioritize the awards.
All I have for the moment. I may have more later. Thank you, though.
This is mid-April. We're approving this tonight. What calendar period do these awards cover?
So I get working on this as soon as possible. And so as soon as the agreements look good to all the parties and they're signed by both parties, work can begin as soon as possible. And so our grant award is standard 2 years. So I set them up to end May 31st, 2028. Yeah, so 2 years.
And
Okay,
the
so I
funds are,
thought maybe it was annually or something.
and then the funds are encumbered and moved into the equipment reserve fund so that they're available for that full 2-year period.
Thanks.
Caitlin, for those people watching or just for anyone really, can you remind us when we changed the requirements of the grant?
Change the requirement?
Well, made some adjustments. So we added the seed money. Can you walk people through that a little bit?
Yeah, so I feel like I came on with the county in 2023. So I jumped right into the grant cycle that year. That was fun. And that year, following that, we did an equity assessment to introduce a few more equity components and criteria and really overhauled kind of everything just a bit, made it all a lot simpler. So that was 2 years ago now. 3 grant cycles ago. And so since then, we've been continually revising, simplifying everything. This year, that big jump was in terms of reducing the maximum award from $75,000 to $60,000 in response to the competitiveness last year. And then adding those seed grant funds as well as the administrative adjustments to help make those seed grants hopefully a little bit easier. I'm excited to hear feedback from applicants. That'll be another next step that I do to see how effective that was or felt to the applicants, and to see if we want to continue that moving forward. But it's been a casual progression or a steady progression toward making everything match, everything makes sense. Now all of our application questions match the review criteria, which match the guidelines. And I'm proud of that work so far. And I feel like each year I open up the program materials and I'm like, who made this? So there's always more work that can be done. But excited about how things have been going so far. And I feel like the community's responded in a positive way, but a little overwhelming, but definitely positive.
Thanks for that. And so the question I have, and you've alluded to a few things that you've sort of noticed this year. Anytime we are picking winners and losers, and it sounds like your committee did a very detailed job, things come up that make us go, Is there anything that came up for you that you think we need immediate attention to for next year, or sometimes it's better to wait a little bit and see what the next cycle looks like and like? So maybe start with anything immediate that you think you'd like to get feedback from the commission on.
I think currently it's that the for-profit businesses, that's the biggest one that was really noticeable for me this year that I think would need immediate attention next year. And the council, the Heritage Conservation Council, has not met yet since then. So they'll meet in May and we'll do a full sort of recap. So there might be a couple of other things that the council brings up. But that was my main one. And then also evaluating the seed grants to see if we want to continue this kind of staggered, because the applications were different, they were reviewed totally independently of each other. So I also want to talk to the council about how that felt and how that worked. But I should know, about summer, what we might want to focus on going into next year.
So then my follow-up is, if that's the immediate, are there any ones where you're wanting to see, like, over time, do we see patterns here? One pattern I saw when I looked at it was, we in the past have funded some what I would call capital expenses, and those seem to drop off this time. Any thoughts on things? I mean, they might be applied for next year and they qualify, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I also noticed that pattern. I think that's been a very steady pattern in the program. We used to support a lot more structural capital projects, and now it's a lot more open-ended community projects. And I think that's been intentional on the council's part and on the work we've done with the program. And so, yeah, I think feedback that I've gotten and when I've, suggested or thought about maybe constraining the program a little bit more. The council does like it nice and wide open, so perhaps that is a great point for future conversations as we look to the program of perhaps, reining it in a little bit to make the expectations of applicants and then the reviewers make a lot more sense. But for right now, it is nice and open, but that could be something to flag in the future if we're really not seeing an appetite to fund those structural type projects or those capital projects, if we want to continue doing that in the same program.
My last question, thanks for that, is that there were some projects it seemed like they may have different applicants, but the project is around the same thing. So I think there are more than one project around Haskell. There's more than one project around Burroughs Creek. I think those were all different applicants. Am I correct?
Just about, yeah. Yep.
And so is there anything that the council thought of about how, do we want to fund multiple things about the same thing? I'm just curious what their thoughts were.
Yeah, that was the topic. Again, thinking of the geographic priority, that's another one of those prioritization pieces of the diversity of project themes and types. And that was brought up often, especially in this year's conversation. There was a lot of similar projects that kind of had similar themes. Those can be challenging for the council to navigate just because they are independent requests. I know in the past their comments have been, oh, I really wish these two groups of these two separate applications had jointly applied. But that kind of wades into the waters of making projects that ultimately aren't theirs to see through. So that is challenging, but I guess simply, yeah, the diversity of themes is something that is considered, especially as something I struggle with in my role in the pre-application meetings. I try not to intervene too much. I like to, let the grant applicants, do their work, but every now and again, I'll send a quick email to connect folks if things are looking very similar. But I try to walk that line a little bit.
Thanks.
I'm kind of on that theme of some of the restoration projects that had been funded in the past, and fewer of them funded. We still had applications, but not as many funded this time. Couple of things. One of them, I wonder, we used to have a $75,000 maximum, then we went to a $60,000 maximum, but the most we gave out was 35. At some point, you drop below the threshold of what's helpful for a project like that can actually stabilize and keep things, even to keep it long enough for them to apply for other grants or other projects. So that's one thought that I wonder if we want to wrestle with some, like if 35 is the max we're likely to give, maybe we shouldn't be advertising 60, but if we want projects that kind of fill those three buckets, the cultural, the biological or natural, and the restoration kind of thing, we may need to keep a higher amount there. So that was one thought. And the other is, can you talk, I think there was some discussion amongst the council and amongst applications about national and state registries for buildings, like how that weighs into the conversation.
Yeah, so currently any historic structure or project that deals with a historic structure is eligible to apply. But when that was how it was before I started, and then I was like, this is so confusing. So how we have it now is that priority for funding is prioritized for projects that are listed or seeking listing on the register. And so that's kind of how we determined that. The council, when we had discussed that and added that in, I believe that was in 2024, they wanted to keep it open in the case that a structure was culturally or significant to the community that would still be viable for funding, but that it wasn't eligible for listings. That's why it's open currently. So that is something that's considered. It can get, that's a very tricky area for the program. One of the things I advise the council on is perhaps not focusing on that quite as much, especially for buildings that might be in progress or might just have a few more question marks. The state is wonderful. We have a wonderful historic tax credit and incentive program, but they don't often have the time. Even if an applicant, submits a request in early January, they still might not hear back by March. So when the applications are due, so I tend to caution them of, the state will get a chance to review it, and I'm sure the applicant has the great intent. So maybe not factor, the fact that they don't have a letter from the State Historic Preservation Office, hinge the decision on that. So they do take that pretty loose, and especially if the applicant expresses that willingness to work with the Secretary of Interior standards and do things by the SHPO rules and requirements, it's generally okay. But that's kind of how we have it outlined there. I feel like it still is kind of confusing, so that's an area I'd like to continue to improve on too.
Not to mention that the tax credits are available after the fact. They take quite a bit of processing on their own, right? Like that's a big lift for an organization also.
Yeah,
Even just to capture that money.
Yeah, it's tricky because it is technically money available, but it's not money available in the truest sense. So recognizing that it is helpful for a project, but that it's not realized and doesn't help, getting a project off the ground. Yeah, that's tricky.
My last question for you, Caitlin, is just, I'm just curious if you have any thoughts to share with us about your perspective or observations on why and how so much attention and more and new applications came. I'm curious if you can, if you got feedback in sort of your pre-application meetings and stuff about how folks learned about it, especially the new folks or new organizations and groups that applied. But I'm just curious if you can pinpoint any intentional outreach efforts of the HCC members, other things that you might have done differently this year that you feel like attracted more.
Yeah, well, that's been just a goal of mine personally. And so I just do personally a lot of outreach just through email. I've collected quite the list of nonprofit contacts in Douglas County. And whenever I see something or an organization that might be of interest to this grant program, I've got a beautiful little email that I send out. And so that's, I think, the primary way that folks have heard about it. I think it continues to grow in support across the county. And I know it's shared through the website and social media too. Carrie does a great job with that. I know I've gotten direct feedback that they saw it on Facebook, so that's wonderful. That happened this year, which is cool. But yeah, that intentional email outreach and just I like to share about it whenever I'm at community events or things or working with folks throughout the year of whenever something kind of piques my interest, I share it with folks. So yeah, that's definitely a goal of mine.
Thank you for that. And I heard you say you've collected quite the list of and are still sort of always adding to the list of nonprofits and community organizations. Have you done any direct outreach to any of the for-profit businesses, since we were having a discussion and that's sort of part of what we need to grapple with? I'm just curious if that has been a surprise to you, or if there had been some outreach or natural connections that happened that kind of led you to expect that there would be an increase in those types of application or those types of applicants.
Yeah, I have not done any specific outreach for the for-profit businesses just because I do kind of have that understanding of they might not be as successful, even though they are technically eligible. So, but I think the folks or the businesses that do find the grant program are actively working in that historic preservation, cultural heritage space. And so that's kind of how they hear about it more. And so, yeah, again, the reason why it is open is because, these folks, while, they have a business to run or, a property that they maintain, they do care. And that's kind of the way I think they find themselves in the program.
Thanks. That helps. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay. Thank you, Caitlin. We'll go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to come forward and provide public comment on this item? It looks like the microphone's already unmuted, so no buttons to push. You can just start talking.
I'm Paul Ballmer from rural Compton. And I served on the original Heritage Conservation Council, and the various types of requests for support have certainly changed. 30 years ago, a rock company wanted to place a quarry at the head of our creek to expand the turnpike to 6 lanes. Thanks to strong community support, it was withdrawn before it reached the county commission. This creek is the site of the pre-Civil War Camp Sackett. The Camp Sackett, and this is where Sarah Robinson wrote her book. It's where John Brown Jr. and Charles Robinson were held for treason. And I just want to show you that it's a real camp. This is a cannonball that Dad found and a smaller one that he found. And I wonder, there are hundreds of creeks in Douglas County, and are we eligible for a grant, or how do we go about getting a grant to preserve our creek? Because apparently it's something that is possible. 30 years ago, the previous owner of the high school, the attendance center was closed, and it was opened as an educational service center, and it received a grant from the for new restrooms and 2 floors of restrooms and a fabulous theater. For 25 years, it has been maintained by the City of Lecompton and the Lecompton Community Pride and Empowerment. This building contains marble floors, just halls and stairways, just like Strong Hall and the Topeka High School. I would invite you or anyone to tour the building and hope money will be available sometime to preserve this historic building. You were asking about matching grants. I know that the matching grant for this building was $30,000, $25,000 from the City of Lecompton, and $5,000 from the Community Pride group. This money was all volunteer group. So I will end my conversation.
Well, is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment on this item?
I'm Elsie Middleton. I grew up in rural Lecompton Township. I live in Lecompton City now, and I support this program. I've been a member of several communities efforts that have received grants, and I thank you for the opportunity to express myself tonight. When I reviewed the results this year, I was concerned as a taxpayer. Originally, in my experience, most of the grants were to be public properties or public organizations. Access to various places had to be available to the public and so forth. I don't know, is that still a concern? Is that still a criteria? When I looked over the grants this year, I have a concern in that I'm not sure that I want my taxpayer dollars going to support a private railroad club that's going to educate us on history. But they don't appear to be, according to their description, they don't appear to be aware that there were also depots in Eudora and Lecompton and probably some other places along the way. Another one that concerned me is one entity received not only a target grant, but also a seed grant. And I was concerned about when I looked at the 11 target grants, 7 of them appear to benefit one particular cultural group, and that concerns me a little. Thanks for letting me express myself.
Thank you for your comment, Elsie. Is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment on this agenda item? Thank you, Elsie. Okay, anybody raise their hands online, Sarah? All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for any questions that might have raised or any additional comments.
I did have a few more questions. I was trying to let other people have time too. Caitlin, do you mind? And actually Elsie raised one of these, and I kind of hesitate to pick out one project. We have just a few lines about each one of them and then the amount requested, and given so I know that the council and that you know a lot more about these than we do. The model railroad one, it didn't show me like how that becomes available to the public and what that lasting good is. Is it fair to ask about and there's questions about others too, but that's one that kind of did strike me.
Yeah, I feel like I am trying to recall their application, but I think they did include I think it's either monthly. I hesitate to say the frequency, but they do intend to have public open houses to view and interact with their exhibit. So in that particular case, that is something that's included in their proposal. And I one of the things that we do or can do with the grant agreements is add any considerations from the Heritage Conservation Council or from folks as requirements of their grant award. And so in that particular case, I think the council also raised that as well as what's the accessibility of this. And so that's something I can work with the applicant on too.
Yeah, and not knowing all the work that goes into that, like, is it possible to bring that to a public space rather than expect the public to come to it? And that was a question that I had, and something that we may and similarly with some of the others about like what's the lasting product. And I know a story can be a lasting product, but just is that a lens that we've kind of specifically tasked the council with to kind of have something that has some permanence in the community?
That was something that actually came up, and I feel like I'm recalling these conversations here of the permanence of the project did come up a fair bit this year. And so there's always kind of that push and pull of the one-time event type projects to the more permanent exhibit or tangible projects, benefits to both. And so that could be something we continue to talk more about in terms of prioritization of what do we want to see more of. That permanence question though did come up a fair bit this year in consideration of these awards.
And I can imagine my fellow commissioners up here having really different opinions about that. And there may be a time when we want to have that conversation and see if there is more guidance that should be given to the council.
Yeah, and that I just want to share too, that's a difference of opinion among the Heritage Conservation Council members. I think that is that can be a tension point in the conversation. And yeah, I think that is a very fair observation.
And so we have a small board that is kind of picked to have a variety of expertise that's on there, which the folks that have that expertise are also, likely to be connected somehow or another with potential applicant. How do you manage that on the commission, on the committee there? If you've got someone who may have a connection with one of the applicants, how do they participate in the conversation or not?
Yeah, so we have a conflict of interest procedure policy, some form of that. So if the council member, it's mostly left up to their discretion, but if they believe that they have a real or perceived conflict of interest with an application, particularly related to their employment or financial considerations of them or a partner, that they will recuse themselves from the conversation or the discussion of that particular application. And then also, I often field questions from the council members of, oh, I know this person from church, like, is this okay? And I think my advice is, you are all community members. You are part of this community. You know about this work that's happening. It is okay to know folks who are applying or understand the work in a way that might be more deep than, your fellow council member. But I just give them the advice, do you think you can be objective in the review of that proposal? And so if they don't believe they can, then they'll recuse themselves. And if they do, then they'll proceed with the discussion.
They would recuse just from a particular application. They wouldn't recuse from the entire conversation of weighing projects against each other.
Correct. Yeah. And so that's where it gets a little, you just get into that messy space a little bit, but they do a very good job, especially the council moves pretty discreetly between talking about the project. So it's pretty easy to, for them to participate or not participate. And then kind of at the end, when kind of at the group consensus, that's when the group consensus comes in play. But they do a very good job of moving and discussing the projects kind of as individuals.
Thank you.
Kaylin, I saw you taking notes earlier, and it seems like there's some things that have come up that my opinion is that we should send it back to the HCC and for them to make a recommendation. So for example, this public versus private, that's one that I tracked. Another one is sort of the percentage. I do agree with Commissioner Willie that if we go too low, we start to, while we're giving out more grants, which is great, we may hit a threshold where people aren't applying because the number is so low. I am familiar, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but I've seen tiered awards where you say, hey, we have 3 awards at 60,000, we have this many at 20,000. And it sort of feels like with our seed grants, we're sort of starting to work in that area. But I would be interested in hearing from the commission. Was there anything else that you were picking up from us or that you had that you think the commission needs to go back? I know tonight it's about approving the grants, but I think we've all talked about process a little bit, that you need to go back and get a recommendation from them that then we can give you feedback and make a final determination on.
I mean, I would say I think there's just a lot. I'd be really interested in what their overall feedback, having gone through this process this year. So if they have other reflections that might be beneficial for the commission to consider also weighing in on as we think about the revision, that might be helpful. Everything from, are you properly weighting all the criteria? Are there too many criteria to make it effective? Some of those different things that was touched on.
Yeah, I think I just feel like highlighted of like definitely this summer, early fall, doing a really solid review and kind of recap, of the changes that have been made and identifying, we've definitely identified quite a few tonight that that could use attention. And so working with the council over the next couple of months, over the summer months, and perhaps coming back to you all, if there are any significant changes that I think might need a little more time, perhaps then when I come in December with the 2027 awards, we could kind of see if there's any input that might be needed, along that way.
I might suggest that let's do it a little quicker than that. Perfect. So that if they have some feedback earlier, that if before you get closer to guidelines being finalized, that the commission has plenty of opportunity to sort of review their draft comments and the draft revised guidelines and make sure we've got plenty of time to make that happen.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll build in a ton of time this year for sure.
And if there's capacity to also kind of get feedback from applicants on what they noticed in the process. I know some of them watched and listened through the whole way through, and they may have some thoughts that are helpful for us to hear also.
Yeah, I just want to appreciate Paul and Elsie for coming and sharing your thoughts. And, I think we're continue to work on this process to see how we can get it better. I do appreciate Caitlin's work and your whole group. It's really, you put a lot of thought into it, and ideally we'd have enough money to fund all the things that ask for it, but I hope they'll stay engaged with it, and when it comes back, if they still have concerns as the HCC makes recommendations to us about the program, I hope they'll weigh in then as well.
Yeah, I want to echo those comments and say that I think that, sort of it's the beauty and the pain of an iterative process and one that is evolving and growing. And so I think that these conversations are healthy, and sometimes the pendulum swings far in both directions, right? To, just use a cliched idiom, but because at one point, there was a very small pool of applicants and a very sort of one note specific type of projects that were project ideas that came forward and sort of similar content. So in some ways it was perhaps a more straightforward and predictable process for some former or tenured HCC members and some newer, less tenured HCC members, might have a different memory of, it's a little bit more of a complex and broad space to be evaluating. So I do think that a lot of these questions are important for us to continue revisiting. And I have a tendency to think that, I'm really eager, certainly, to hear from HCC broadly about, like Commissioner Kelly said, some recommendations about how to fine tune the process. It's my opinion that some putting up more containment around it is probably the direction that needs to be gone, right? It helps manage expectations better across the board, and hopefully can go towards making the process for the members doing the review and assessment and collaborative decision making a little bit more clarifying about, because even me just reading this, and to Commissioner Riley's point, very small nuggets, tiny little executive summaries of the projects, is a lot, and it raised 1,000,001 questions for me, right? So I can imagine what the full review of all of those applications and thinking about all of those sort of, I don't totally want to say competing, but coexisting values and ideas about what natural and cultural heritage is, what it means, what it could look like, where does it matter to invest dollars now versus possibly, dollars later could help. There's just a lot there. So I want to encourage you and HCC to really think about how to create some containment. And I'll just sort of leave it at that and look forward to some specific recommendations. One other thing I want to mention, and to Commissioner Riley's point, we all certainly have different opinions and ideas and values that would feed into our own assessment and evaluation of these awards, right? So I do want to walk a little carefully here, but I want to say that I wonder if the HCC has had any conversation or if it's sort of come to a head to assess specifically when there are project requests around cultural heritage preservation to interrogate who it is that is making that ask, what organization, what entity, who is representing those requests, and are they a part of the cultural community that they are seeking to do projects related to. To just be very plain about it, I have some concerns about potential cultural appropriation in some of these projects. And without having seen all of it, I just want to acknowledge it out loud and say that I think it's it can be a tricky, sticky space to have conversations in. But I think that given the circumstances of this program, thinking about how do we sort of analyze and interrogate the appropriateness of who it is and what identities they represent when they are bringing forward projects that might be about other communities and other identities that they are not necessarily a part of or hold themselves.
One thing we do that does not make your packet or the public piece of it that I think is really helpful to address that piece in particular is letters of support. Specifically, if a group, organization is named in your project and you are intending to work with them, having that letter of support from the organization, from the people that will be involved, is something that I don't require, but really highly encourage, and that is something HCC looks for, that is something they're mindful of. But yes, that is a concern, and that was one of the big concerns when I joined with the county and kind of saw the program. So we can continue to communicate that and incorporate that in how we talk about the projects. It's a really great point.
Thank you. And I appreciate the acknowledgement that it is something that is being looked at and considered. So thank you for that. And letters of support are huge. And like I said, it's a sticky, tricky. It's not just a straightforward conversation, but it's a conversation worth having. And I think, the good stuff lives in the nuanced discussions. Any other thoughts or questions, commissioners? Otherwise, I'm ready for a motion.
I was just going to say, if this isn't anticlimactic, I think we're likely to or I will be willing to make a motion for the slate of projects that's been offered by the council. But I really appreciate you letting us react and brainstorm about some things that we maybe want to have a bigger conversation about or get more feedback from the council. So I would make a motion. I move to approve the 2026 Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Awards as recommended by the Heritage Conservation Council.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Great. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, partners and guests. We do have 2 more agenda items, but I'm going to take a point of privilege and take a 5-minute break, please, before we dive into the next one and give staff and partners an opportunity to set up. So we will come back. I'm going to look at the digital clock back there. We're going to come back at 7:08 in 5 minutes. All right. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back to our, I almost said June, weird, our April 15th County Commission meeting. We are at agenda item 4.4 now, and I will turn it over to Bob Transky.
I'm resisting the urge to talk to myself. There we go. Good evening, Commissioners. Bob Tryansky, the Director of Behavioral Health Projects for Douglas County. I'm joined this evening by my colleague and partner and good friend, Dee Kynard, Director of Manager of Informatics at Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. We collaborate as the conveners or the co-conveners for the behavioral health plank of the Community Health Improvement Plan. And what we'd like to do tonight is just provide a brief overview of some of the progress that is happening within various focus areas of this plan. We did an update several weeks ago with the CHIP Steering Committee, and one of the things I wanted to remind folks of is this is an ambitious plan. There are many pieces, many of them moving in relation to the other pieces of the plan. And so I think sometimes it's helpful to focus in and ask ourselves, where are we making progress? Where are there challenges that we need to pay attention to? And where are there some opportunities to continue to move forward and improve? As everybody knows, but I always like to reiterate it, we've got a vision for our behavioral health system of care. It's a vision that was shaped by the Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition, a group of CEOs of 9 organizations and operations folks, and a whole group of people that really dove into this commitment 8-9 years ago. But the vision remains the same, and that's an integrated system of behavioral health care that serves the whole person, their whole life, so they can realize their full potential. This is the 3rd iteration of a community health improvement plan that has a behavioral health plank in it. And we tried to, this time, see if we could get a little clearer or be more focused or write this thing and present this thing in a way that you can wrap your head around it if you're a member of the community. So we have 4 objectives instead of 9 this time. One is focused on supportive housing. One is focused on reducing suicide mortality rates and preventing suicide. One is focused on reducing drug use and specifically drug overdoses in Douglas County. And one is taking a look and getting upstream and trying to implement some interventions and approaches that would reduce chronic absenteeism in Douglas County. There are 6 focus areas that support meeting or striving to meet those 4 objectives. And we're going to focus on 3 of those tonight. We're going to look at the progress that's been made in the suicide prevention space and the implementation of zero suicide. We're going to talk a little bit about integrating lived experience across the system of care. And I'll just say to commissioners that we're going to come back in a couple of weeks and give you a deeper dive on what specifically we've been doing with the Peer Fellows program, with integrating peer support throughout our system. I'll highlight a couple of things in places where we're making progress tonight, but we're going to try to give you a little more granular understanding in a week or two. And then, you know, one of the big commitments here that started with the passage of Proposition 1 or Proposition 1.1 was optimizing the behavioral health crisis response system. In all of these areas, we've tried to sort of have a simple goal that's easy to remember. And that is, we're going to aim for 0 while we strive for 5. And the idea behind that is 1 chronically homeless person in a community of our size is 1 chronically homeless person too many.
One drug overdose that might be preventable is one too many. One chronically absent student in our school system is one too many. I'm missing the fourth one because I should have started differently, but you get the idea. Aim for zero. Zero is an aspirational goal. Zero suicide is conceivable in a community of our size. We have 122,000 people. We're not a community of 6 million people. And even though we're trying to do big city things and big community things, we've got the supports and really a tremendous investment on the part of the community to take these aspirations seriously and to deliver on promises made and aspirations set. So what I would say, just to give you some color coding, is the three areas I'm going to talk about tonight, and that Dee and I are going to share, are areas where I think we've gotten really close. If you were to look at the report that I attached to our agenda item report, some places where we've really made some significant progress in these three areas. And it's not that we haven't made progress in the other areas. I just think right now we've made more progress to date in these three areas. And that's good. It just gives us an opportunity to come back maybe 6 months from now and talk about the other three. I know that Dee has been having trouble with her internet connection. She's at a conference, so she might pop back and forth. And Dee, we're going to be okay with that. So I highlighted specific things related to those three areas, but I just kind of want to go through a list and hopefully open some time so we can really have some dialogue and answer your questions. I think there's some significant milestones that need to be noted. And kudos to the Public Health Department, cooperation with Headquarters Counseling Center. When we look at the idea of implementing zero suicide and reducing suicide risk and preventing suicide attempts in Douglas County, there's been some significant, concrete, tangible things that have happened. The 2025 suicide data brief was released at the end of last year. The Douglas County Suicide Fatality Review Board, a new thing that Dee will speak to with some detail, has been fully implemented. That group has met twice last year and will meet twice again this year. And coming out of the Suicide Fatality Review Board, one of the really tangible things that we can point to tonight is the development and implementation of a community-wide effort to increase targeted messaging and promotion of 988. So there are three kind of milestones that have been hit under the suicide in implementing zero suicide. In addition to establishing a zero suicide coordinator at Public Health, there's been a ton of work, and I just wanted to tip my hat to Jonathan, to Dee, to Sarah Landry, and the team at Public Health, because I really feel like they've taken seriously the challenge of trying to implement what is a quality improvement process that's typically targeted within one healthcare organization. What could happen if we were to implement that same process throughout all of our behavioral health partners? It's a pretty inspiring aspiration, and it's also challenging. In terms of milestones related to optimizing our behavioral health crisis system, I think one of the things that we made a lot of progress in last year, toward the end of the year, was setting up a structure to allow oversight, not governance so much, but oversight, feedback, and a forum for continuous quality improvement through kind of a three-pronged new thing. And that's the Douglas County Crisis Response Coalition. So that group was chartered last year. It met twice last year. It'll meet 4 times this year. In the planning for that, the partners committed to having a group that would meet more frequently and be more focused in terms of looking at opportunities to improve the crisis system. So there's the Douglas County Crisis Response Coalition, and then there's a crisis systems operations team. That group meets every other week and has consistently for the past year. We are looking at a lot of things related to how people flow in and out and through the crisis system. We're looking at what metrics and data pieces and how we can integrate and continue to share data in ways that are helpful for all of our partners to understand how the crisis system is functioning. We've made some progress in using tools that we brought online quite a while ago with My Resource Connection There's now, I think, a need to sort of maybe have some more tools to be able to get more sophisticated and nuanced with tracking how the system is performing in real time. And we're going to talk to you about that and through the budget season. And I think there's some opportunities to consider some new tools in terms of software for tracking system performance. So that really, in terms of like putting that in place, I think is one of the most fundamental things in terms of leadership and oversight and giving our partners a space to exercise leadership, set priorities, and to bring recommendations or proposals back to the county commission that have really been vetted by our partners through collaboration and consensus. I'm very excited about this structure, even though in some ways we're starting again from scratch from what we lost when the Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition kind of came to the end of its season. There's some real positive things to talk about with respect to the Treatment and Recovery Center. When you look at the metrics, the monthly dashboard numbers that Bert Nash shares with us on a regular basis, the treatment and recovery metrics continue to indicate that the Treatment and Recovery Center is doing exactly what a 24/7 crisis intervention center is doing. And that is significantly diverting people away from unnecessary emergency room visits, from state hospital admissions, and jail bookings. Every one of those sets of metrics has changed for the better, for the more better, instead of less worser, much better. And we can dive into the specifics of that, but just 30,000 feet, that diversion away from expensive, unnecessary, high intensity interventions is working. And then when we see, I'm going to highlight, like, here's an example of like a specific goal and aspiration that was set by the TRC team, which under pressure, I would say, from the community when the TRC opened to, well, how do you know if people who are going to the TRC are getting the care that they need after they leave the TRC? That's a really good question. And one of the things that the TRC team and the data analytics folks and the quality improvement folks at Bert Nash have shown is if you zero in on the percentage of people who complete a follow-up outpatient visit, probably a good indicator. And I just looked at it before we started, but when the TRC opened, about 50% of folks were completing an outpatient visit, and it fluctuated down a little bit. We had originally said we would want to strive for 85%. So when we looked at the baseline data, suggesting, well, maybe our aspirations are a little bit too high. Leadership at the TRC said this might be unrealistic, so we calibrated it down. In the plan, we said we're going to strive for 75% percentage of people who complete an outpatient visit following discharge from the TRC. Well, guess what? We just got looked at the report for the first quarter, and we're at 85%. So there's been a 15% increase over the last 6 months in meeting that metric. And I think that just speaks to what can happen when you look at, what gets measured gets done. And when we're looking at the impact of collecting 3 years now of data, the data tells a story, and the story gives us opportunities to learn and to grow and to get better. We set a goal last year to try to put some structure around measuring success of the Familiar Faces initiative. And, an in the weeds strategy was, can we get better as partners in getting people who need help and need help from multiple parties? Could we do a better job of getting their permission to share information, to coordinate their care through a process such as Familiar Faces? And one of the things that came from some of the trips that Commissioner Reed, Jason Hess, and others took through our learning community visits with the National Association of Counties, sponsored by NACO at no cost to the county, was looking at the number of people that signed these releases of information. And we got some help from our friends in Orange County, California, for what a shared release looks like that works in Orange County, California. And we've implemented that. And we've had a 20% increase in the number of familiar face referrals who consent to share information. A year ago, our partners were saying, well, this person just doesn't want help, or, well, they seem to indicate that they want help, but they're reluctant to sign a release. Well, I think we're all learning how to approach a person and to sort of stay with a person and come back to a person as they go through the stages of change and being willing to consider help and consider treatment. We've had continued expansion and growth in the development and deployment of the Peer First workforce. When we started this work, Bert Nash had about 5 half-time peers 10 years ago. I think they were 8 years ago. We now have 10 dedicated Peer First responders on the street. There's a peer on the MRT team. There are multiple peers with the intensive care coordination team. There are multiple mirror peers supporting the homeless response team. There are 10 people with peer support certification who are engaging and interfacing and working as a first responder or a different type of first responder to that complex person who's out in the community, is unhoused, unsheltered, and is really having a difficult time connecting and being willing to accept help. That's a huge plus. KDAD's granted Alive Inc., our consumer-run organization, funding. Last year, they've more than matched the county's funding to support the position for 2 positions, actually. And there's a new partnership that we've established with the Kansas Clubhouse Coalition down in Wichita, and we have a peer fellow who's going to work at trying to achieve the goal of bringing a clubhouse, a mental health clubhouse, to Douglas County. A clubhouse is a psychosocial rehabilitation program that's run and staffed by its members. It's an evidence-based approach to that type of community building model that's been around for about 30 years. There are 7 of them in the state of Kansas. Douglas County would be the 8th. So we've got some pieces in place to really start to do that work. The Breakthrough folks were here in town this afternoon, meeting with the peer fellow that's going to be doing this work. And we met over at a potential building where we might be able to set the clubhouse up this afternoon. So the work is underway. So those are some of the milestones. There's challenges, and challenges come to us because systems are hard and adaptive work surprises you. So we still are trying to figure out the best way to get all of our partners on MyRC. And this has been a challenge with Bert Nash and been a challenge at Bert Nash that I think is teaching us a lot. It's teaching us some of the things that when we ask our partners to share data, that's a lift for our partners. All of our partners use different EMRs. Some are more complicated than others. But the one thing that we're really hoping that we're close to having Bert Nash's data on MyRC is because at the moment, in the absence of that data, a person cannot look into MyRC and see when and if a person has had a TRC visit or an MRT run in the same way that they can at LMH. And I know that Bert Nash has embraced this challenge. All of our partners have gone through this challenge and hit these roadblocks with their vendors or what have you. But once we get there, we're going to be able to really say that we have a really solid shared data set and a window on how all of the pieces of the system are functioning. We've had unexpected setbacks with the Rockledge Permanent Supportive Housing Project, and also with the Justice Involved Housing Project that we talked about toward the end of last year that we were not able to bring to fruition because as we got up to signing an agreement or not signing an agreement, it just didn't feel like it was going to be the right fit with this particular landlord. But the challenge of this is the Rockledge project was 24 units of permanent supportive housing. That's 20% of the supportive housing objectives in terms of numbers of units. And that project is not going to move forward. That's a challenge for all of us now to figure out, well, what replaces that and where can we do that and who are the partners that are going to accomplish that goal, because we still need those 24 units. We might not be able to bring them online all at once. It might take a combination of projects. We might need to change our thinking. I think there's also, we've been having meetings on the Justice Involved Housing Project. I think we might have a proposal to bring to you before we enter into budget season in terms of a possibility. I don't want to make any promises, but the point is we continue to work on this. Limitations of state funding and reimbursement sources for peer support continue to challenge us. The County Commission is paying for most of the peer support work that we're doing in Douglas County exclusively. And part of the reason for that is because the reimbursement rates and who can get reimbursed for peer support, the state is not as progressive as other states and other parts of the country on recognizing the value and how to leverage peer support. And then the last piece, which is kind of disappointing news for all of us, it was the loss of the MyStrength online resource for Douglas County residents. Teladoc Health absorbed that tool, and the implementation was just dreadful. And so we decided, rather than confusing everybody and making folks frustrated, we were going to step away from that aspiration. So some challenges, not insurmountable, but they just sort of help us to know what the work is that's ahead of us. And then in terms of opportunities for system improvement, I think they include, again, this data integration piece that allows us to follow a person in the system in real time. You know, that's what we're doing with the real-time by name list for homeless individuals or individuals experiencing homelessness. We need to be able to follow people in that same way, whether they're experiencing homelessness or they're not. MyRC has helped us to make a lot of progress in this space over the last 8 years. MyRC is probably not the long-term solution and the sustainable platform and window that we need. And so we're starting to have conversations about what the right tool might be. There's opportunity to increase advocacy, to expand funding sources and reimbursement for peer support. I think it's time to pull our partners together and say, how can we collectively kind of go to Topeka, pull down some of these models and share them as priorities as we move into one legislative session or another. That might be a crazy aspiration. Sarah always tells me not to choke on our aspirations. So I want to
Aspirate on your aspirations.
aspirate on my aspirations. Thank you. Yes. And then the last piece is, while we have made a lot of progress of having peer support in a peer first response type of mode, it's been challenging to recruit and retain those folks in settings such as the TRC on the MRT team, which is a 24/7 team with overnight responsibilities, and with mobile integrated health. So those are some opportunities for system improvement and growth. So I wanted to give us time, and then I want to make sure that we have time at the end for Dee to kind of give us just a quick update on progress we've made in the suicide prevention space. But what questions do you have on optimizing the behavioral health crisis system?
I think one question that rises to the surface for me is, and maybe you don't know the answer to this yet, but if we're identifying that MyRC, which has been a tool that we've, invested a lot in getting folks on board with and optimizing, do you have a sense of how much longer we think that tool is going to serve us well before really having to think about a different platform?
So it could serve us forever, right? Unless Johnson County stops supporting it, right? Or it could serve us forever unless compliance officers in one place or another start to question whether it's durable enough or appropriate enough. I'm going to give you an example of something that I think has been a challenge that's come from Douglas County that Johnson County had also been considering it because the conversation yielded. Mirror said, I don't mean to single Mirror out, but they said, we don't feel comfortable with a process like this if they don't have dual factor authentication. And they didn't. Well, now we do, right? And that's a result of the collaboration. So it's not so much that MyRC, we've already asked Johnson County to build more functionality into MyRC than it was ever really designed to do. And that's been good. But in terms of, if you think of the case managers, care coordinators, folks that are managing facilities like the TRC, to be able to look into one window and see where's the person touching the system and be able to say, where should they go tomorrow and how can I set that appointment or how can I connect them with that resource? That's a gap that doesn't exist. And we've been talking about that closed referral gap as partners almost as long as we've been talking about and bringing MyRC online.
Got it. Thank you. Commissioners, other questions for Bob at the moment, or shall we turn it over to Dee? Dr. Kynard. Oh, you've got a little
One
bit.
more thing, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Were there
Bob.
questions on, I mean, we can jump around, but my slides are in a particular order, so let's not get confused. How about on integrating lived experience across the system of care? Work with peers? Any questions there?
No, I think we've been aware of the challenges with it and also the vast benefit of having peers in that system. I mean, that's what we hear from folks who make life changes is it was because of a peer. So just very supportive of us continuing to work through this difficult thing of getting folks trained and then retaining them and supporting them in healthy ways. I recognize the need for it.
We do have a deeper dive planned for peers on May 11th. So another agenda item.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to my good colleague remotely, Dee, and I'll advance the slides. I've got a couple, but you want to just share the Suicide Fatality Review Board and what grew out of that in terms of this new thing that we want to talk to you about, which is the implementation of these throughout our park system.
I just want to confirm that the slides that you're showing are not in our pack. Is that correct? They're somewhere in there.
It's a summary. This is a summary of the
Of
things that
all
were in
those
the
slides. Okay.
Yeah. But what was in your packet is much more granular about each particular place where we've made progress. I pulled them together to try to have 3 simple slides so we have a focus.
Just in the future, if we could have one, because some of us, we want to keep our eyes on you and we have to look all the way over there to see where you're at. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Dee.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So at the end of last year, we came to you and gave you a fairly detailed description of what a Suicide Fatality Review Board is. That was before we actually launched the Suicide Fatality Review Board. So since then, we have actually launched this board. We've had 2 meetings, and the wonderful thing about this is that we've had extremely good attendance from all of our members. We have met and we've reviewed 4 cases. We've had a surprising outcome, and that is that usually with these boards, it takes a year or more to come out with a prevention strategy. But after actually 1 meeting, we had some indication that we had a good, we had enough information to say that we had a good project. And we went back and looked at our data and found that, in fact, the recommendation that came out of the board was that we put 988 signs in parks because we had evidence that people were dying in parks from suicide. And so when we looked back at our data, we found that, in fact, when we look back at all of our cases of suicide, that, in fact, the number of people dying in parks had gone up over time. And that when we looked at the crisis calls to 911, that those crisis calls in parks also went up over time. And so because of this, we went back to our policy group that is also part of the board and took to them this information and asked them to endorse this idea, which actually has been really, really helpful because they've actually helped us to garner support from all of our community members to allow us and to help us get permission to put this sign, which we together with the sheriff's office, with headquarters, with the city, with public health, and with DECA. We put together this sign that we are now going to be putting into parks all over the county, in the county and as well as in the city. And the unveiling for this is scheduled for April 30th, unless there is rain, at 4 p.m. And all of you should, if you haven't already gotten an invitation for this unveiling, you will soon. But the Douglas County Sheriff's Office has been just amazing. They're providing the funds for the signs. And as part of this campaign, we're going to have a communication campaign that will accompany the unveiling of the signs and the putting the signs up in various parks all over the city and the county. But the communication campaign, the purpose of that is to increase knowledge of 988 in our community. It's been a actual shock to me that people don't know about 988 because we live and breathe this information all the time. And so I think we need to do a better job of publicizing that 988 exists. And so these signs will be one way that we can do that. And then as part of this project, we're going to evaluate the project to see if, in fact, putting these signs will help to prevent suicides in our county. There's some evidence from other communities that doing this kind of work actually does work. So I'm excited about this. It's been a labor of love. And so I'll stop here and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dee. Commissioners, any questions about this particular detail?
We have the date and the time. Do we have a location for this unveiling?
Oh.
All parks all at one time?
Is. No, it won't be all parks at one time. It's going to be it'll be in Clinton Park, but we'll give you a specific location in Clinton Park.
All right, thank you.
I'm just curious, you mentioned that they'll be throughout the county. Has that coordination include, there's a couple of county parks, there's many City of Lawrence parks, and then there's also 3 other municipalities. Has this included coordination with the other municipalities so it'll be in all public park spaces? Is that the idea or goal? Maybe it's the aspiration, but not yet.
It's the aspiration. There's a starting point. The starting point is diverse. It's not Douglas County Park specific. We do have Lawrence and the other municipalities participating, and the conversation is ongoing. I would expect that this will be the first round of sign planting, and then there'll be some opportunities to do some more signage.
How many signs are going out initially?
We would need the undersheriff here to give you this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got about 20 signs. So I think we'll start with 20. And if we need more, the sheriff's office has said they can produce as many as we need. And to put them up first in the parks where there have been more calls and also suicides. So we're focusing on those first.
Other questions, commissioners, about any of the topics discussed in this update?
I'm excited for the signs. That's not a question, but I think that that's a really logical step, and I'm glad that we're not taking any time to move on that.
I think my one question is really just about the Suicide Fatality Review Board in general. I think I heard you mention that there are 2 meetings planned for the year. So, and I know we had a deeper dive about this, but just refresh my memory. Is that something where there's just sort of a specific cadence to those meetings? And by the time the next meeting date comes around, there will be cases and situations to review, and it could be one or it could be some. Is that what's true, or is there any part of that the process for the Fatality Review Board that is maybe convened or called to meet based on either a family's request to participate? I'm just curious to understand a little bit more about, I guess, the expectation and cadence around the meetings and how they occur.
Dee, I'm going to take go ahead. You've been choppy, so I was going to take a crack at it and then, okay. So the coroner's office provides reports on the folks that have died in the last 12 months. So there's only so many times you could do this in a particular given year. And the process of getting the family's permission is a process. The process of screening these is a process. And so I think that the thought is that we did it twice last year, that repeating that twice this year seemed like a good fit and would always be subject to growth or expansion. Am I saying that?
Yes, and actually we did see, we had two meetings very quickly, and I went to the members of the board and I asked them if they were willing to do this kind of work so quickly, and they were all enthusiastic about that. So our initial plan was two meetings a year. But we've had more people sign consent forms than we initially expected. So we have enough for two more meetings.
That's helpful to know. Thank you. I've been curious a little bit about the process, and I appreciate you, Bob, reminding us that those reports coming from the coroner are, on a 12-month basis. Is it you, Dee, or somebody on the board perhaps that is going through the process of seeking consent from families and participation? Is that I'm glad to hear that you seem surprised to have gotten so much interest in participation and consent from families. But curious to just understand, once a list is received, is that a role for you, Dee, or is there somebody else who's playing that role of doing the outreach and engaging family members? And then along the way, determining, do you need two more meetings because there's so much here to talk about?
We manage the project, and the death investigator who has been at the scene before actually sends out the letters and signs them. So it does not come from public health, but rather comes from the Douglas County coroner.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate those details. Commissioners, any other questions?
So, Bob, you showed 3 areas that you were focusing on today. Is another report coming on some of the other areas and goals?
Yeah, that would be the plan.
Okay. Do you know when that is?
No.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no other questions from commissioners, we'll go ahead and open this item up for public comment and invite anybody who's here that would like to provide public comment up to provide your name and residence if you're comfortable doing so, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Any takers? Just audience members tonight? Okay. Any virtual hands, Sarah? Okay. We'll close public comment on this item and bring it back for any further discussion. And just a reminder, this is no action and for informational information only.
I would just say if commissioners have other questions on some of the items in Bob's packet, if you want to pass that on, we can try to get those things scheduled.
Yeah, I know we'll have a discussion about chronic absenteeism that is actually in the plan, and we've talked about truancy and things like that. I was just curious on why we didn't cover it. I do want to say, Bob, and you have a whole team of people, so it's hard to address this just to you. But it really is clear that you are recognizing that we can set goals and that we might not hit all those goals. We may get close. And I think that's something sometimes that in an era of accountability that we sometimes say, well, just hit the goal and do all the things and make sure that it happens. These are incredibly complex systems. Each person we interact with is very complex and different. And so I appreciate that thing of 0, strive for 5. Like, to me, that's a hard thing, I think, sometimes to communicate to members of the public. We're spending lots of money and lots of effort to try to make strides here, and we are making strides. It is not something I think we're just going to be able to cross off and say we'll never have to deal with that again. So I appreciate the update and recognizing that and all the work that people are doing. I think the thing that really hits me is hearing how Bert Nash is trying to get MyRC. I chuckled and rolled my eyes, and I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. Because I think when MyRC first came on, that was the conversation and we're still having that conversation. It's hard work And it seems like so many organizations coming through have that problem. I'm sure when we talk about truancy, we'll talk about how we integrate data too and how difficult it is. So just recognizing that the expectation is we solve these things and the reality is that we make progress on it. So thank you.
I just wanted to comment a little bit more about MyRC because, having been a part of the Familiar Faces seed planting, if you will, and seeing how that's grown, and MyRC predates that, but I think that the Familiar Faces initiative and all the collaborative work that's been done there has really helped boost the mutual benefits of and the investment in that program in terms of community, providers and organizations really seeing that there's viability and purpose to it. So I am eager for us to sort of pay, and I know that we will. And to your point, Bob, we've asked Johnson County to, add and expand and increase the capacity of that program far beyond, anywhere they initially intended to, perhaps. And I'm grateful for that. And I feel a little bit worried about the idea that there are sort of external pressures or things that might could undo some of that process. So just wanting to really keep a close eye on how, if and when, if as to the degree that it's predictable, we may need to consider that there are other options and in a way that doesn't lose the momentum and the buy-in from all the community partners that have engaged in it, that have seen that there are benefits to it, that there's opportunities to further increase what that coordinated system of care really looks like. So it's a real technical part of the process, but I think that it's a pretty big anchor point. And sometimes things go away or change radically from the way that we initially have them. But I'll be eager to know if, especially hearing a little bit of context about how there could be different pressures that feed into that and where it hits a wall and the lack of usability. But if there are regulatory and or statutory pressures that are impacting that or impacting providers' desire to use it, that those sort of technical things, I'm interested in us figuring out how to nugget out, because I think it's such a key part of the coordination and really convening of good information that over time is going to help residents more and really gives a full history of attempts at intervention and contact and support and how that has progressed over time. And that I wholeheartedly believe that it's of significant benefit for providers once, you get into the rhythm of how it can be used and applied. So I just want to lift that up, and that I'm a big fan of that program and all the work that county staff and community partners have done to invest in using that and realizing that it's an important tool in the toolbox. And I'm hopeful that we can either grow it or we'll replace it with something bigger and better if we must in the future. Otherwise, I think that, it is a big, it's a lot to talk about in many, many things. And so I can appreciate why we're talking about 3 particular areas here, and that there's some more to discuss later, and that it takes a significant amount of community partners working in very different regulatory and or grant, directed spaces, and that there are a lot of challenges to that. But I continue to be impressed with each of these updates about how, even though we may not be meeting goals that we set as we set them, that progress is still continuously obvious and evident, and that we just keep building on that and celebrate what progress we have made while still striving to get to those goals if we can, and recognizing that it's important to acknowledge the pitfalls or the things that we couldn't see in front of us when we set those goals, and readjust and recalibrate along the way. Any other closing thoughts, commissioners? Okay, well, this was for informational purposes only. Thank you again, Bob, and thanks for joining us, Dee. Safe travels to you. With that, we will move on to item 4.5 and invite our Director of Public Works up. I'll turn it over to you, Jonathan.
Let's take public health.
Public health, not Public Works. Thank you.
Give me 1 second. Let me get the technology going here. Where is our presentation? That's a good question. Is it on here? Not seeing it on here. All right. All right, I think we're ready now. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jonathan Smith, Executive Director at Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. Thanks for having us here tonight. It was not too long ago that I was in Sarah's office for one of our update meetings, and Sarah, Jill, and Bob were all like, hey, you got some new stuff going on at the health department. We should probably get in front of the commission and talk to them about that. So that's what tonight's presentation, or I should say discussion, is going to be about. So I do believe that all of you are pretty familiar with our core services and the responsibilities that we have in Douglas County. And just in case you aren't, our most recent annual report is available publicly on our website at ldchealth.org. And we brought copies for you. Sarah has them over there so we can make sure that you get them. Shout out to our fantastic public health information officer, Rachel Gomez, who's in the audience, who put that together. She did a fantastic job. And so, like I said, tonight's discussion is not about what you know that we do. This is about some of the new developments that we got going on and a couple more updates that you may not know too much about. But as our largest funder, it'd probably be a good idea for us to tell you about these things. And really, we're excited to talk to you about some of the innovative ways that we are able to utilize our funding. And I'm really excited that normally when Lawrence Douglas County Public Health is here, I'm up here talking, but tonight, we got special guests in the building. I brought some of our public health superheroes here with us, our subject matter experts, and I think we have Charlie Bryan's online, so at some point he has a part in this, so you'll have to let him in. And before I pass it on to our Director of Clinic Services, Christine Ebert, I wasn't planning on doing this, but yesterday I had a meeting with Vicki, our Director of Policy and Planning, and I gave an analogy about how we're feeling right now. So it feels like we are in a heavyweight fight, right? So we just finished the first round. When you think about everything happening around us, the social determinants of health that we're battling, all the different funding things that we're battling, you know, even state, national level and all of that. But it feels like we just got done boxing a really good round. Like, we're tired, but we just got done. We're walking back to our corner. We're like, yeah, I think I did good that round. We did good. Like, I think we're ahead on the scorecard. But when you sit down and you're getting your water and everything, you're getting ready to get back up and you realize, I just feel like I almost gave everything I had, but the fight must go on. So now we're past that part of, you know, sitting in the corner. Now at this time of year, we're getting back up and saying, all right, we got to get back up and figure out how to do this again. So I'm excited to be on this team because I feel confident that we are prepared to get back up again and win the heavyweight fight. So without further ado, I will pass this on to Christine Ebert, our Director of Clinic Services, going to kick us off with some of the newer initiatives that we have going on in clinic, family support programs, and WIC.
Hi, Commissioners, and thank you for inviting us to speak. I'm excited to talk a little bit about what my staff do. This can absolutely be conversational, so if you have questions throughout, feel free to ask. To get started, I'm going to start with some new programs to us, and this one's sort of a revival from something that we had in the past. Once again, this year we are acting as providing nursing services at the Juvenile Detention Center. We transitioned that work, I think at the end of 2022, after some attrition due to COVID. So we're excited to be back out there. Those services began February 1st of this year. So we're about 2 months in. Moving on to our integrated care model with Burt Nash. As you guys are familiar, we have a designated collaborating organization agreement with Burt Nash. That is certainly the first in Kansas between a public health department and a CCBHC. And after a lot of extensive research, I believe it's also the first in the United States. So this is a really exciting thing for our community and our clients. Under this model, the health department provides physical health care for clients, for shared clients, under an integrated care model. So what that looks like in reality is Burt Nash is the subject matter expert for mental and behavioral health, and Lawrence Douglas County Public Health can assume the physical health side. So clients will present to Burt Nash. They get a very high level health screening. If they identify any comorbidities during that health assessment, they're referred to Lawrence Douglas County Public Health if they don't have a primary care provider. And then we take it from there and do an initial physical and follow those chronic conditions for a period of time, 6 months to a year, depending. Those services began January 1st of last year. I'm gonna go out of order only because the second bullet point on this slide goes a little bit better with the Burt Nash DCO that I just shared. So one of the grants, so these are upcoming services or potential services. One of the services that we have applied for a grant for through KDHE is community-based primary care clinic. And the way we would utilize this grant is to offset costs for medical care that we're providing, and we would use it for very specific populations. So as I mentioned a second ago, if a client presents to us that doesn't have a primary care provider, this would allow us to become their primary care provider. Access to care is a problem in Lawrence and Douglas County, and so this just opens up an access point for those clients. And again, it's medical care and, well, really integrated care all under one roof. So it's a really exciting model. We applied for that in March. If we are a successful recipient of that grant, it would begin in July. We would also use that grant to be primary care for our street medicine. So one of the other programs we have at the health department is an outreach APRN that can meet people where they are. And usually that means in the field, at the homeless shelter, et cetera. And so we would also be able to assume primary care for those clients that maybe just aren't quite ready to receive care in a formal medical setting. They may not feel comfortable yet coming into a clinic. What that looks like in reality is we've had clients in the past, we start seeing them in the field, then maybe they're ready to come to our parking lot and we see them outside. And then the next time they come, they're ready to be in the building. So that's just very exciting for us to be able to potentially build and expand on that. And then the last one I'll talk about in clinic services is family planning or Title 10. And so just a reminder, that's affordable confidential reproductive health services. That transitioned to Heartland. That's also a KDHE grant that transitioned to Heartland in July 1 of 2023. And we've worked together to transition it back. So the notification to clients and things like that are ongoing. Family planning has been in the news a bit. It is eliminated from the federal budget in 2027. So Lawrence Douglas County Public Health is committed to providing those services. I mentioned earlier, to me, access is so important. I think there's dignity in choice. And so I think all of our neighbors deserve options regardless of their insurance status or ability to pay. So we are committed to providing those services. But the funding landscape may look a little bit different. Moving on to WIC and family support programs, just a couple updates here. WIC is now providing services in Eudora and Baldwin City. We are partnered with with LMH Health at their Eudora and Baldwin locations to provide those services. And again, it just increases access. It opens an access point. Clients on WIC it is not required that they live in Douglas County. It's just required that they live in the state of Kansas. So that also opens access for some of our rural neighbors in other counties too. Did you have a question? Yeah.
When you talk about you're able to co-locate that work with the LMH clinics in those communities, is that like every day? Is it a couple of times a week? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's once a month right now. We have numbers, and I think, I don't know if they're in your packet. It might be a new metric that we started tracking. We track number of families enrolled in WIC based on zip code. And so right now the numbers are still kind of low. But I mean, certainly we would love to see those numbers grow. And so that way it could justify us being out there a little bit more often. But yeah, that's a great question. And then the last thing I'll talk about is universal home visiting. So this is funding that we have received through MCH in the past, but the requirements have changed. So universal, as the name suggests, indicates that we want to have a touch point with every family in Douglas County once a baby is born. The way this model looks is it's up to 4 visits. So 2 of those would occur prenatally and 2 would occur postpartum, so between birth and 12 months. So under that grant, we're only able to serve the child until they're 12 months old. There are about 12 different educational topics we need to review with them during those 4 visits. And it also, another key purpose of it is to serve as a really robust referral system. So that way, you know, clients can't get they can't get every need met in 4 visits. So making sure that they're connected to other community partners, other resources, other referrals, so they can, you know, hopefully continue that good foundation that we've been able to start.
How do you find and track? I assume it's not just births that happen at LMH, it'd be home births. Where does your client list come from?
Yeah, so this is new. This also starts in July. And so we get, right now, we get referrals from LMH, and Stormont Vale is also, and Topeka is also a big referral source. I had not considered home births. So that's a really good question. And we don't know, because even though it is universal, the reality is we know we won't be able to get every single baby born in Douglas County. So yeah, we are still in the process. We've still got a little bit of time to determine what are the best community partners, where can we meet these families where they are, how can we best support them, because that's also something that looks different for every family.
I think there's a doulas organization in Douglas County.
Doulas of
that
Douglas
might
County.
be
Yeah, they're a great
tech
partner.
meet,
So yeah. Those are my 3 slides. I will now turn it over to Dr. Vicki Colley-Akers to talk about community and environmental health.
Thank you, Christine. Good evening. As Christine said, I'm Vicki Colley-Akers. I am Director of Policy and Planning at Lawrence Douglas County Public Health, which means that I oversee both the community and environmental health teams within the department. Thank you for the opportunity. And like Christine, I'd be happy to take questions as we go. Our community health team leads grant-driven efforts to prevent chronic disease. We also shepherd Lawrence Douglas County's public health policy agenda. We develop policy briefs, conduct health impact assessments, and we provide backbone staff support to the Community Health Improvement Plan, or CHIP. Bob teed that CHIP discussion up beautifully for me. We had a chance to talk before, and one of the things that we talked about are 2 assumptions that go along with the CHIP that we rarely mention. One is that it is intended to be transformational, not transactional. And with that goes that it requires more than one organization. So it's not our health department's strategic plan. And I know you hear Jonathan say that quite frequently. Instead, it's really intended to operate as a strategic plan for health and well-being for our whole county, which means that we have to engage other partners in conducting work. As far as transformational goes, it's important to note that our CHIP consists of 122 strategies that are policy, system, and environmental changes. A risk that goes with creating one of these plans is that you create it, it's beautiful, you maybe have a lovely logo, and it just sits there, right? We're really excited that at the end of year 1, we were able to report progress on 82% of the 122 strategies, really suggesting that we're on a track towards completing implementation of the plan and making that transformational progress that's outlined. Bob described some of the exciting work that's happening within one goal area. I think you've also had a chance to hear from the anti-poverty group and the housing group as well. All of our work groups have exciting progress planned for year 2. One example of that is tomorrow night, and you're more than welcome to join us. We're hosting a public health after dark regarding birth outcomes. We'll be presenting data and hearing from people who have lived experience with challenging birth outcomes, really aiming to provide a catalyst for collaborative action towards improving equity and reducing disparities in health outcomes. Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at the Community Health Facility. I mentioned I also direct environmental health. Our environmental health team is small but mighty. We conduct or complete more than 500 inspections, permits, or licenses every year in the domains of on-site waste management systems, also called septic systems, well water, cereal malt beverage selling facilities, tobacco retailers, and pools. In 2025, we had a lot of change. We onboarded a new electronic system that moved us from paper to online, which has been a wonderful change. We also made changes to our septic or on-site waste management procedures. These included updating and modernizing our soil profile procedures that offer a better recognition of the array of systems that are appropriate for Douglas County conditions. In addition, we received a grant from the state that provides resources for low-income families that are in need of septic repair or replacement. To be honest with you, we have had a little bit of a struggle in getting families to take advantage of this. So we would welcome any support in getting the word out that we have about $50,000 for replacing or repairing on-site waste management.
If you by any chance want to send what the parameters are for participation in that, I talk to people about septic.
Okay, I will happily. I have a, not to be immodest, but a beautiful one-pager that describes the program and its criteria, and we'd be happy to get it into your hands.
Send it my way.
Okay. Excuse me. Recovering from a cold, my apologies. A lot of environmental health to date has been very reactionary and regulatory in nature, and we're really excited to be moving in the direction of balancing that with proactive efforts. One example is that we're working on conducting a sampling effort to better understand water quality and safety in wells. We know that nationally, 1 in 5 wells is contaminated. We haven't been able to access local data, so we're embarking on an effort to voluntarily sample wells for free. That gets information into residents' hands about their wells, but also helps us better understand our landscape. Please.
Super excited about that. And Jonathan will tell you, I've been in his office saying, when are we going to know more about people's well water? Because we don't, because it's always, the onus has been on the homeowner, the well owner
Absolutely.
to test and pay for that themselves. And it was a pretty narrow band of what could be tested for.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you've talked at all with the Kansas Geological Survey and their well testing across the state. And I know we're just a few of their wells, but it might dovetail into it.
Yeah, we've had, we keep missing each other, but I think we both would like to connect and make sure that our efforts are consistent and connected. So that's a goal of ours.
And if our data can feed into their database, then I'm all right if we know more about Douglas County than the rest of the state. But
That would be wonderful.
there's a lot of kind of scary that is unknown at the
Yeah,
moment.
absolutely. I think that's fair, and that's kind of driving our interests. Another way that we're moving into the proactive space around environmental health is around air quality. We were really excited to receive a grant from the Douglas County Community Foundation to establish a citizen science project in collaboration with the Sustainability Office here and USD 497. So we are working towards placement of air quality monitors at the high schools, where we have 2 high school science teachers who are interested in integrating that into their curriculum with real live air quality data. So it's an exciting opportunity that's, again, moving us in that proactive direction.
You know, I keep jumping in. I'm sorry, everybody. This is very exciting. Are those indoor air quality or outdoor air quality?
Right. We applied to buy outdoor air quality, but what became apparent in discussion with the science teachers is having an opportunity to have something that was indoor and outdoor, diversified the educational strategies they could employ. And so we're working to do both.
It's one of the things, strange enough, that's in our comprehensive plan about indoor air quality. And when it came through there, I didn't really know what the basis for that was or who was making progress on that. So this is kind of the first I've heard that coming back around.
Yeah, we're really excited. I think it has so much promise. That experience has led to our additional opportunity. And actually, just today, a professor at KU Lawrence submitted a proposal to the EPA for a collaborative project that would work on wildfire preparedness. I don't know about you. I'm sure you saw all the alerts. We had a lot of red flag alerts this year. So that ecology is really changing. We have dry, windy conditions. So thinking through wildfire preparedness is a next step for this work. And last,
Do you work with our emergency management when you talk about that?
we haven't yet, but I do think that's part of how this project would go if funded. Yeah, great questions. Lastly, I will note, we are very much thinking about World Cup preparation. And for environmental health, that looks in many different ways, but mostly pool inspections. So we are gearing up for a very busy pool season and have already been out to the indoor pools and we'll be working further.
I didn't stop you at the soil one for the septic systems. My soils professor 20 some years ago served on the health board and also talked about how we're passing things we shouldn't, that many of our soils can't handle septic systems or they can't handle them in every season of the year. In the springtime, many of our systems are at capacity or failing because of waterlogged soils. So on one hand, I see like this is a needed change and it reflects reality. On the other hand, it's a really big change from how Douglas County has permitted septic in the past. And I've been hearing from folks that, they expected something to pass. It didn't. So it's just in terms of development and residential development, I think this will start to be something that commissioners hear about. And this is why.
I think that's fair. We're a year into this. We really did start in January of last year. And it's fair to say that we could have done better in educating as diverse a pool of people that would be very interested in this as we could have. So we made sure to get information out on our website. We had a handy dandy one pager, but it's probably fair to say that more methods could be used. And I think that's a lesson learned that we'll be integrating in other changes we anticipate making with environmental health. We also just really agree this soil profile approach is much more modern. It's up to industry standards. And again, it's just really reflective of the diverse conditions in Douglas County.
I'd also add that it's been something we've been engaged with at the staff level as well, zoning and codes. I believe public health has had conversation with home builders. So there has been some outreach in this process. So, and when issues have arisen, Jonathan and I and public health team have partnered to try to get answers to citizens.
Thank you. All right, thank you. With that, I think I'll hand it over to our colleague, Charlie Bryan, who will talk about finances.
All right. Thank you, Vicki. My name is Charlie Bryan. I'm the Business Systems and Finance Manager at Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. This is the only slide I have tonight. It presents the trends in our major revenue sources, which account for about $4.3 million of our annual budget. Generally, our revenue has remained fairly stable over the last few years, but we have seen some changes, significant changes in the mix of the revenue sources. Specifically, we've seen a reduction in federal grant revenue, which is down about $288,000 or 26% over the 3-year period. The primary drivers are the loss of the community-based child abuse prevention grant, and then a reduction in funding for the Women, Infants, and Children WIC program. We do not expect the uncertainty over federal funding to be resolved anytime soon. In response, we've been deliberate about strengthening our revenue streams that we can influence. Our operating revenue has increased by about $210,000 or about 25% above the 3-year average. And most of that growth comes from the clinic services division. We have been able to expand our billable services and our contract partnerships. So the program fee revenue, which is what we earn by billing medical insurance, is up about 11% over the 3-year average. And then contract services is up significantly, $166,000 above our 3-year average. And that's the result of contractual partnerships with both Burt Nash and more recently the Juvenile Detention Center. As Christine mentioned earlier, we're also actively pursuing other grant opportunities, including the Title X Family Planning funding, and then the state-funded Community-Based Primary Care Clinic grant. We hope that will help offset federal revenue losses. So in summary, while our major revenues have remained stable overall, we are strengthening our operating revenues in order to have influence over the uncertainties that we face at the federal level. And that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over back to Jonathan now.
Anybody have any questions so far? All right, keep going. So I've mentioned before, and I think even Vicky's mentioned this, we are a small and mighty team. So provided you with a recent copy of our org chart. And when I look at this, what I like to say is you don't see this title on there, but collectively, every little bubble that you see on there collectively makes up a position called Chief Health Strategist of Douglas County. So that includes you all as well. And so a quick way I like to describe that is collectively, this Chief Health Strategist, AKA everyone listed there, are responsible for the health, capital H Health for Douglas County. So the positions that are light blue, or actually dark blue, are supervisor positions. Positions that are in gray are contracted out positions. And then you obviously know our governance structure where you all appoint half of our board, the city appoints the other half, and then we have a non-voting appointee from KU. So any questions about the org chart before I move on? Hearing none, all right. Wanted to give you a little overview of our employee survey results, which is hot off the press. We just completed this about a month ago or so. And really, we look at this and it looks really good, I will say. Now the challenge is, how do we maintain this? So one of the things that is really important to all of us at Lawrence Douglas County Public Health is just making sure that it's a really good place to work. Because we realize that as far as like salaries and things like that, as a public health department, you can ask all of them across the country, like we're not able to compete with, the hospitals of the world, the other private practices and other nonprofits of the world. But as Charlotte was showing you, as we do a little bit more in our program revenue, if that's the route that we're going down, we got to make sure it's a good place to work. We got to retain our folks. So looking at this, like a couple of the highlights you see where they're not green, so the stuff that's like a B but not an A, looking at some of it is like when we think about our policies, like for example, I was just meeting with Rachel. We could probably do a better job on communicating about some of our policies. Like we're working on sending some of our folks to the NACHO conference, and like the process for filling out a form to be able to go to that conference, people go to the conference and it's approved and everything. But little stuff like that, that's the stuff we need to tighten up. Really, the major focus for us has been on organizational culture, and I think that is really exemplified throughout this. Happy to say that there's not a category, whether it be workplace, mental health, well-being, organizational leadership, and job satisfaction, none of those overall have decreased from the last year. So they're all on the rise. So when I look at this, like, yes, again, using my boxing analogy, it's like we go back and celebrate that little bit of success. Like, yeah, we just won that round. But now when we're getting back in the fight, we're like, whew, we gotta maintain this. So that's going to be a challenge, but we're very much looking forward to it. I'll keep going on this. So then,
Jonathan, I got a question.
Yeah.
The categories that you asked the employees about, was that developed internally or is that a standard questionnaire?
Yeah, so we developed that internally, I would say. And so we have a quality improvement and accreditation coordinator. His name's Wyatt, does a fantastic job. And he looked at questions that we've asked over the past few years. you don't really want to deviate too far from them because then it becomes hard to compare the data. So a lot of these were questions that we've asked previously. So like, for example, you can see there's a few years on there, 2024 through 2026. These are questions that we came up with. The other thing I'll add is that we have a workplace wellness. Is that the name? We just renamed it as a workplace. We call it the fun group, workplace culture council. I'm not on that council. And I'm happy that I'm not on that council because it is staff members who are part of that. They actually contributed to this as well. So collectively, they help between our QI and accreditation coordinator and our, I'll call it the fun council, the fun at work council. They're able to contribute to this. Yeah. You got something?
I just think this is a fantastic victory lap. I think you should be incredibly proud over this. I mean, when I first came on the commission, there was a similar survey done at the health department, and there were a lot of struggles internally of folks, feeling valued and heard, and this is phenomenal. So I just want to. You glossed over it like this sort of thing happens every day in organizations of your size, and it doesn't. I was really proud, and I think you should be too.
Thank you. We had a good team. All right, I'll move on. So this is more of like a heads up of what's happening at the state level. So for years, I would say that Kansas Department of Health and Environment, KDHE, it's kind of like been this thing that like you hear whispers of and like, man, I think maybe we want to do this. This meaning like a term that is used as regionalization or spectrum of sharing arrangements. Like you see this document here that was put together by the Public Health Accreditation Board. But more recently, and as recent as the Governor's Public Health Conference a couple weeks ago, they actually had a whole session dedicated to exploring new approaches to public health service delivery in Kansas. And really, that's going to impact every single county in Kansas will be impacted by this if KDHE's vision happens, but it's not going to happen without counties and county commissioners getting on board with some of this stuff. So another term that's used is like regionalization. The one term that's on here that I failed to define what it was, but it's CJS, that's cross-jurisdiction sharing. So looking at this shares some of the different examples of how that happens. Right now, we're probably doing, if you look at the looser integration, that first green dot, and then the first bullet point under that, like we share information right now with other health departments. We don't have really anything formal or anything like that. I know our WIC department, we can see anybody from any part of the state. But what this is really looking at, an example I'll give you is like, I know Johnson County, for example, they do childcare licensing in more than just Johnson County. So this is something that KDHE is looking at. Large health departments like ours, believe it or not, we are considered a large health department due to our population size. We're the smallest of the large, but they're looking at large health departments like ours and challenging us to say, look around your region. What are some small health departments where they're not offering the same services that you are, and how can you help them do that? And so this document that was shared at the Governor's Public Health Conference kind of laid out the different opportunities that there are. And I would say for us right now, we haven't engaged in any formal discussions about any of this. Definitely wanted to give our governing bodies the heads up about this and all that. It's a pretty big shift. So I would say right now, we're basically in the developing relationship stages, like with Jefferson County and some of our smaller counties surrounding us. And I know this is going to be a challenge for a lot of other counties and probably even ours, because one of the things that's going to come up is, there's going to be commissioners who say, well, we don't want our local dollars spent in other communities. And what I would say back to that is like using childcare licensing, for example. Let's say we did childcare licensing in Jefferson County. That doesn't mean that we would ask Douglas County for more funding. KDHE, our award would be bigger, but we would be responsible for the budget in Jefferson County. So another way to look at it is, they didn't say this at the Governor's Public Health Conference, but this is just Jonathan Smith's personal opinion on this. I do believe that this is a way for KDHE to save cost on their end, because just as much as we're getting, cut and things like that by federal government, so are they. They're the pass-through for it. So if you think about like WIC, for example, if they had less affidavits to go through, less applications to go through, that saves them on admin time. So we look at this like we are in a position to take on services in other communities. Like there won't be there won't be communities or counties coming into Douglas County to do services on our behalf because we will develop the capacity to do that. And so this is really, I won't spend too much more time on it. I'm sure you may have questions, but this was our very early heads up that like, this is talk that is getting a lot more serious at the state level. And it's something that we're starting to look at. And obviously it's not a decision that I'm going to be able to just make on my own. Like that's what we have a health board for. So we have you all for. This is just a extremely early heads up on what the vision for KDHE is for the state. And I can't even give you a timeline for it because I don't know how long it's going to take to happen. But, you know, it would be foolish of us not to at least start developing those relationships. And the other thing too, like one way to look at this is like, as you know, where Charlie talked about diversifying our revenue streams, like this is a way to do that. You know, if we can contract with another county, that's a contract in our contract services that would go up. It's navigating how do we do that. That's going to be the tough part, but I have confidence that we'll be able to. We're just getting started on this very long journey. And so that was my last slide. So I'll stand for questions. We got our team here. Yeah.
Thank you. This is not a question, it's a comment, but before it leaves my brain, on your last couple of slides in this sort of long road preview of possible changes coming down the road, to your point about being considered one of the biggest health departments in the state, although the smallest of the biggest, you know, we're one of the big 5 counties. And so in recent years, the big 5 counties and, you know, us, Shawnee, Johnson, Wyandotte, and Sedgwick have had been communicating more and convening around, you know, advocacy efforts at the state level. And so I think as this is coming down the pike, keep that in mind that, you know, as governing boards are starting to wrestle with these, and each of those counties, as you are well aware, have totally different makeups of their of their health departments, and you know, ours being a unique one with an independent board. But that might be an opportunity for some cross-jurisdictional collaboration between commissioners and discussions about what makes sense in terms of regional planning, especially given that 4 of those 5 large departments are all in Northeast Kansas, right? And so it's not really it'll be interesting to see how that conversation evolves given the geographic disbursement of resources already.
Yeah, and we have some of that in place now. Shelby, who I think most of you have met, Shelby Ostrom, our health equity policy analyst that we do get county funding for. She actually started a large health department legislative work group. They meet pretty frequently. We just had a meeting this last Friday, but we work on things like, you know, looking at expedited partner therapy, which has had some success recently, if you paid attention to what's going on there. So, and actually at the last meeting, we actually had discussions of, okay, we got this going. We're pretty solid with the large health departments. Let's look at the next population size of health departments to start including in this. And I will say, because of our status as being an independent health department, you know, when I go to these meetings like Governor's Public Health Conference and all of that, I actually try to not really talk too much about our status because, you know, I feel really privileged to be in it, to where it's like there's some health departments who are not able to submit testimony. Their commissioners will not allow them to do that at all. But our health board trusts us to do that. And so, but this group collectively, like we all work together on that. And so we're getting a little bit of a head start on that. So.
I don't know how aware that group was, the starting with the 5 largest counties of the health departments getting together to look at policy things. But the group that Commissioner Reed is talking about, it would probably be good to have some lines of communication between the two to see if there are things that we can kind of coalesce around just for the future.
Commissioners, other questions for Jonathan and his team? Okay. Seeing no questions, thank you very much. You can go ahead and stop screen sharing if you're able to. And we'll open this item up for public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to provide public comment on this item? Seeing no takers, any virtual hands, Sarah? Okay, close public comment and bring it back to the commission for any additional comments, thoughts, conclusions.
Just a big thank you to the team for being here till later than probably you was advertised for tonight, and for giving the update. I really appreciate it.
So, Jonathan, you're going to act like it's no big deal, but the stuff you're sharing with us tonight is a huge deal. I mean, we need to recognize that, right? You've increased the amount of services that we're providing to people of Douglas County, and you've done it while we've been seeing federal cuts at the budget level, and you've improved your whole organization's feeling about it. You'll shirk it off because I know you, Jonathan. That's kind of the way you are, but it's really exceptional. You've created partnerships where I will tell you 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't think that partnership could exist there with some of our partners. I mean, 3 of us sat here through the Title X discussion and had a very tough conversation, and I remember that, and you've repaired that conversation. It's your whole team. It is. It certainly is, but that starts with leadership, and you've just done a fabulous job. This report is really outstanding on what you all have been able to do. You should be really proud, and I know we are.
I was just excited about septic and wells, but I would echo all of that also. And things like the conversation around the soil profiles and septic, like that's honestly been a 30+ year arc of conversation that this year you're rolling it out. Like I know those are all our builders aren't going to love it, but that's Commissioner Kelly wants to talk about some of the big pictures and monumental kind of relationships and things, but all of these things are working beneath the surface too, and I'm just pretty excited to see that.
And I'll just add one more detail and shout out that I'm really excited about the increase in focus on the environmental pieces of public health department's work, and that those are really critically important parts of public health and what folks are dealing with on a daily basis. And so that sort of attention to and programming around and enforcement of environmental concerns in our community, and a decidedness about choosing to take those reports of mold or other things seriously, that matters a lot to this commissioner. So I just want to make a point of that. Thank you all. Okay, any closing thoughts? All right, this was for informational purposes only also, so no action. And that concludes our regular business agenda for the evening. Thank you all for staying with us. We've got a couple more procedural things, starting with appointments. I do not have noted that we've got any appointments queued up, but checking with commissioners to see if there's any other news. Okay, great. We'll just move right on to our miscellaneous item and start with Sarah's memo.
Thanks, commissioners. My memo's in the packet. Just want to you got a lot of dates on there about things coming up here, but I really want to celebrate that next Tuesday is County Discovery Day out at the fairgrounds from 5 to 7 in the open pavilion. Come touch a truck, come dress up like a judge, come do a cakewalk, come see a lot of our county partnerships and and it's a great family-friendly event. Commissioners, next week, we do have a work session at 4. And that is all I have for you. Oh, and the veto session from the Little Government Relations report is attached. That came in over the weekend, so I wanted to make sure you all saw it. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, any items for the good of the order this evening? All right, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.